Good morning and welcome to the April 6, 2016 Board of County Commissioners meeting. I am Kate Flavin, the Interim Public Information Officer. Commissioners, before we get started this morning, I would like to bring up Jeanette Livingston to talk to you a little bit about Autism Awareness Month.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Jeanette Livingston, the Assistant Director of the Sedgwick County Developmental Disability Organization, and I'm glad to be here to recognize April as Autism Awareness Month. Autism Awareness Month was first recognized by the Autism Society a little over a quarter century ago. Their goal was to promote education, inclusion, and self-determination for folks with autism. It's autism or autism spectrum disorder, as it's now known, can have significant effects on an individual's ability to communicate, as well as have behavior challenges and social issues. It has a diversity of effects, which is one of the reasons the Autism Society went with the puzzle design for their Autism Awareness ribbon. The puzzle design, the diversity of shapes and colors, is meant to represent the diversity of families and individuals affected by autism. The bright color represents hope. Hope that individuals with autism with early intervention and understanding of the disorder will have full, productive lives. Currently, the estimates are that approximately 1 in 68 births in the United States are affected by autism, and it affects over 3.5 million people in America. I wanted to talk about some of the cool stuff going on in our community related to autism, and I thought I'd start with Moxie Junction. Moxie Junction is a coffee house, bakery, and art gallery in Mays, Kansas. Moxie stands for Mothers of Exceptional Individuals. It was started by Joanna Kilgore and several mothers in the Mays, Kansas area whose children had graduated school but were unable to find employment successfully in the community. So they created this coffee house as a method to help build job skills for their children. And here in the picture you can see Joanna with some visitors from China that came to visit and learn about her unique concept for helping individuals with disabilities. Here's Joanna with some of her employees. She employs both individuals with disabilities and those without to provide an inclusive environment for building job skills. Also wanted to mention that the Independent Living Resource Center in their Greater Expectations program, it serves individuals with high-functioning autism ages 18 to 35. They work an evidence-based strategy to build individuals' life skills, social connections, communication, organizational skills. It's meant to be the bridge between education and training and employment. Some of the folks have been fairly successful with high-functioning autism in school. Some of the folks have graduated with college degrees but have not been successful in finding community employment. So this program is meant to help them develop those soft skills that can lead to successful job placements. An Autism Avenue, the flower and gift shop at Douglas and Meridian, is kind of the platform or the tool they use to help folks develop those skills. You see in the picture a couple of program participants. The flower shop is not intended to be a final destination as far as employment, but kind of a stepping stone. Each individual in the program identifies their own job goal based on their interests and abilities and work towards that. Another thing I wanted to mention, I didn't get the information in time to include in the PowerPoint, but the Sedgwick County Business Leadership Network is hosting a webinar and lunch and learn April 19th. It will have a webinar from a father who's going to talk about his son's experience, struggles with autism and trying to find employment in the community, having been fired over 30 times, and what it took for him to be successful and what he learned from that process. Also in that webinar, after the webinar, they'll have a panel discussion, and they'll have representatives from the Independent Living Resource Center and Moxie Junction to talk about their experience working with and hiring individuals with autism and special needs. For more information about that, folks that are interested could go to the BLN website. That's blnsg.org. Or they could call Peter Daniels at 660-1941. Individuals also looking for resources are welcome to visit our website. It's sedgwickcounty.org/CDDO. On our website, we have a link for community resources. We have a directory of our affiliate providers, and that will provide the providers that serve folks with Medicaid waiver funding. But we also have a Community Council resource guide, and that was put together from our Council of Community members. So they're individuals with disabilities or families who have individuals with disability, and resources and services they've used and they've found helpful. And so that was a guide they put together, and you can find that as well on our website. Individuals are also encouraged to call the Sedgwick County Developmental Disability Organization if they're seeking help. We can help individuals apply for services, understand their service options, identify funding sources, and explore case management. Our phone number is 660-7630. And I want to thank you again, Commissioners, for having me here just to recognize the April as Autism Awareness Month. And I did want to make sure and mention that we did provide you each with an Autism Awareness lapel pin, the lovely little puzzle design. And thank you. I'm open for questions.
I just want to say thank you for being here and for presenting that information. I know that autism is one of those things in our community that's really changed just in the last decade or so. I know in Topeka, as a legislator, we had a lot of hearings on the way that our demographics have changed regarding autism in Kansas and really across this nation. And it's hard to identify those causes, but we are trying to react. And I guess that we did pass a state law. It took us several years to pass, and I was glad we finally were able to get that done. But it deals with screenings and treatment for autistic students entering into the school system. And so I think that that was a step in the right direction. I'm glad that our state has made that important. And I don't know if you have any information on how that state law has changed anything in our community. Do you know anything about that?
Not off the top of my head. I do know, did it require insurance to cover certain items related to autism? I know that was very helpful for individuals, families. There's a lot of unknown expenses that you have when you have a child with a disability, and for your insurance to step up and be able to cover some of those medically necessary services is a real godsend. So
it's interesting. It was a very bipartisan topic. There was people on both sides of the aisle that really were strong supporters and were strong opponents as well. One of the more difficult debates I witnessed in Topeka, but we did, after I think about 3 years worth of work, did see that law pass, and so I was just curious if you had any information. Well, anyway, thank you for your presentation this morning. I'm glad that Sedgwick County is engaging and I guess coordinating some of the community services, and thank you for all you've presented this morning.
Thank you, Commissioners.
All right.
Thank you, Jeanette. And with that, Chairman Howell, I will let you take it from here.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kate. Madam Clerk, first item, please.
Invocation to be led by Pastor Sean Mikowski, the Seed Church. Please remain standing for the flag salute.
Let us pray. Father, we come before you. In our minds, God, is the promise found in Isaiah 26:12. God, you will ordain peace for us, for you have indeed done for us all of our works. God, fresh in my mind the conversation of autism. I thank you so much, God, for all the people that you've created. God, I thank you for the leadership this morning. I thank you for the precious families, God, that you have gifted these precious children to. We pray for their strong support, God. We pray for peace. Father God, we know that there's no authority except that which you have established. We know that from Romans 13:1. God, with that in mind, we pray for the leadership in this room, God. We pray for their endurance. We support them, God, with our prayers. In our prayer closets especially. God, it's one thing to pray in public. It's another thing to pray alone. God, the Father who sees in secret, God, rewards those who pray in secret. And so, God, would you bless those, God, who take the time to support those who make great sacrifices for this city, God, for the welfare of this city. God, we love this city. We pray that you would grow us, God, strengthen us, strengthen our foundations. Make us to be built upon righteousness, God. And I call to mind, Lord, Psalm 24. You say, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and those who dwell therein. For he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the rivers. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? Who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. He who does not lift up his soul to what is false and does not swear deceitfully. He will receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. God, we pray for blessing. Would your hand reach out? Would you extend your hand to bless, God, the homes, the families of the leadership here this morning, God? Father, we thank you for this morning, for the breath in our lungs, for another day, God, to be just little people, God, doing what we've called to do faithfully. We pray this for the glory of your name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I do need to call this meeting to order, so I do call to order the regular business meeting of the Board of County Commissioners for the date of April the 6th, 2016. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner Unruh.
Present.
Commissioner Norton.
Present.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Present.
Commissioner Ransaw.
Present.
Chairman Howell.
Present. All right, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Public agenda.
Do we have anybody signed up to speak this morning? I guess I seeing none. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item, please.
Consideration of minutes. Item A. Regular meeting minutes of February 3rd, 2016. Commissioner Norton was absent.
Commissioners, what's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, if it's agreeable with my colleagues, I'm going to make a motion that we adopt the regular meeting minutes of February 3rd, February 10th, and February 17th, 2016.
Second.
We're going to have a motion and a second. Seeing no discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Abstain.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Commissioner Ransaw.
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. All right, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item D. Regular meeting minutes of March 2nd, 2016.
Commissioners, what's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we take the recommended action and approve the minutes for March 2nd, 2016.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Seeing no discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Commissioner Ransaw.
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. All right, moving right along. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
New business. Item E. Resolution to establish a general proclamation policy.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Yost, County Councilor. Item B is a resolution adopting a proclamation policy. Commissioners had asked the manager and the councilor to develop a written policy related to citizens or groups seeking proclamations from us. And this sets out the criteria for obtaining a proclamation. It also sets out the steps for obtaining that. It's pretty cut and dried. There are certain people who are qualified, obviously, for that, and these requests will be considered liberally. These proclamations, once they're adopted, are honorary and they're not legally binding, of course. The folks who are asking for the proclamation need to submit that to us. They have to have a brief description in their request as to the event or cause to be recognized, some reasons for the proclamation, and a call to action explaining how Sedgwick County citizens can support an event or an issue. Generally speaking, the request needs to be made about 3 weeks in advance of when they want the proclamation adopted. The request will be vetted by county staff, and they'll be informed then if their proclamation has been placed on the agenda. And they can either be here in person to receive it or not, and it's up to the chairman to decide who should read the proclamation at the meeting.
Very good.
And I think that covers, and of course the requesters, they communicate this to the county manager's office, who do that early vetting, and then the manager will have a system worked out with commissioners for asking you whether or not something should be placed on the agenda.
Very good. Well, thank you for the explanation, Mr. Counselor. I want to say thank you for the research you've done. I want to say we've looked at a number of governing bodies, and proclamations are done lots of different ways. There is no standard out there, but Sedgwick County has never adopted an official policy regarding proclamations, and so this is just, formalizing what we do. I think we want to celebrate things in the community, things that are important to the commissioners as well, and this lays out that process whereby things can get on the agenda. And so this is really mostly just administrative, trying to get things documented on our processes and procedures. And so, Commissioners, do you have any questions regarding what we're doing here? Any comments, or Commissioner Ranzau?
I would move that we take the recommended action.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I would ask the members in the audience, does anybody want to speak to this item before we take any formal action here? Yes, please.
Good morning. Sarah Green, 3416 East Pine. I had one question about a line in the policy that deals with the majority of county residents, using that as maybe some sort of a yardstick to decide whether a proclamation should be read. So I just had a question about that. Thank you.
What is it she's referring to? Sorry.
There was a line in the, I didn't bring it with me, the issues of relevance or interest to the majority of county residents.
I think the very first bullet point under who would be eligible to receive it states that the Commission will consider requests that are timely, have potential relevance to a majority of the county's population, and either forward positive messages or call upon the support of the community. I think that's what she's referring to. I think that's just general language. I assume that any proclamation we would want to adopt would be something that would be impactful to the people of this community.
And I guess just the thought behind that is there are potentially some things that are very maybe a city-centric type of topic that maybe would be very appropriate for us, one of our cities to adopt a proclamation, but maybe is really not something that the entire county would have knowledge of or an interest in necessarily. It's really just in the judgment of the commissioners. If the item, I guess, fits these criteria, then we ought to hopefully support that. But I guess this gives us some ability to, I guess, be more objective in saying this is something that really is not a county issue. It's really more of a small city or city-centric type of issue. So just a guideline. It's not a hard rule. I think this helps us develop, I guess, reasons as to why we might support or not support a proclamation request. So it's not intended, I think, to be a negative comment. It's really simply saying that proclamations really ought to have county relevance, hopefully, because we are the governing board of the county. We'd like to make sure that the things we do here have relevance to people who live here and we serve. So any other members of the audience like to address the commission on this agenda item? I see none. Bringing it back to the board. Any further comments or questions? All right, seeing none. Madam Clerk, we have a motion and a second. Please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau.
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Proclamations. Item F. Proclamation declaring National Public Health Week.
Commissioners, I do have a proclamation that I would like to read. And Becky Tuttle, you were here? Very good. In just a moment, I'll ask you to speak. You have about a minute to let us know your perspective on this, and I'm looking forward to that. But let me just go ahead and read the proclamation first. It says, whereas during the first full week in April each year, the American Public Health Association brings together communities across the U.S. to observe National Public Health Week. And whereas this year's theme, Healthiest Nation 2030, encourages public health professionals, healthcare providers, decision makers, and residents to partner together to spur the community to make the healthy choice the default. And whereas National Public Health Week provides community members with an excellent opportunity to make changes that will have big impacts in their health. And whereas communities can support behavior changes by creating environments that make healthy choices the easy choice through improved access to physical activity programs, fresh fruits and vegetables, health care, and health education. And whereas everyday public health professionals work tirelessly to reinforce these messages and do their part to influence change. And whereas one of the Sedgwick County Health Department's public health champions, Dr. Doran Fredrickson, passed away in 2008 after dedicating his life to improving the health of Sedgwick County community. And whereas his legacy and that of many other public health champions, such as Carolyn Gahn, are commemorated through the Doran Fredrickson Lifetime Commitment to Public Health Award. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Jim Howell, Chairman of the Board of Sedgwick County Commissioners, do hereby proclaim April 4th through the 10th, 2016, as National Public Health Week in Sedgwick County, and I call this observance to the attention of all our citizens. Commissioners, what's the will of the board?
I move that we adopt the proclamation.
Second.
Commissioners, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Congratulations, Becky. I'd like to ask you to speak for about a minute if possible.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Board of Health members. Thank you. It's an honor to be here today to accept this proclamation for National Public Health Week, and then also to take this unique opportunity to present this year's Doran Fredrickson Lifetime Commitment to Public Health Award. The individual is chosen that has shown a lifetime commitment to public health and contributed to major achievements in the area of public health research, education, and health care. And this year's recipient is Carolyn Gong. Carolyn, congratulations. Thank you. Absolutely. I'm going to just read a few words about Carolyn and then let her say just a few words. Carolyn has had an illustrious 34-year career, and she's currently serving as the Executive Director of the Kansas Academy of Family Physicians. She has led the Academy members and community partners through initiatives that both challenge the status quo and advance the mission to promote access to and excellence in healthcare for all Kansans through education and advocacy for family physicians and their patients. She's been passionate about tobacco control in our community and also at the state level, and has made sure that the Academy members have been active in tobacco prevention for their patients. She's been a member of the Tobacco-Free Wichita Coalition since 2003, and she was honored with the Kansas Public Health Association Virginia Lockhart Health Education Award in recognition of her outstanding work in tobacco control in Kansas. She led the charge when the city of Wichita wanted to adopt a clean indoor air ordinance, and then also helped with the state Indoor Clean Air Act that was adopted in 2010. She has also been passionate advocate for immunizations and has been a member of the Immunize Kansas Kids Steering Committee since 2006, whose goal is to protect Kansas kids from vaccine-preventable diseases. Following her appointment, she was asked to be a consultant and subject matter expert for immunization-related studies regarding primary care physicians for the Kansas Health Foundation-funded research project completed by the Kansas Health Institute. The purpose of the study was to identify barriers to improving the state's immunization rate, and then developed an action plan to oversee the barriers in a unique and sustainable way. Her accolades are vast. We could speak for hours, but we'll try and keep it brief. But she's also been honored by the Wichita Business Journal as a healthcare hero in 2012. Most recently, she led the charge for the Kansas Academy of Family Physicians to develop a public health ad hoc committee to help inform and engage family physicians in public health efforts, including local and state legislation, to improve the health of all residents and increase access to health care. Congratulations, Carolyn. You are truly deserving of this honor.
Thank you. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Members of the board, thank you so much for this honor. I am truly humbled and honored to be selected. I would like to recognize my special guests, my husband Pat, my parents Bruce and Kay Klein, my sister Miriam Overholt with the camera over there, and many friends and public health people involved here in the audience today. As Becky mentioned, our organization is a membership association which represents the family physicians of the state of Kansas. We have about 1,650 spread across the entire state. You're probably more interested in how many are here in Sedgwick County, I'm going to guess. There are 483 here in this county, including our active practicing members and students at KU School of Medicine and residents at both Via Christi and Wesley Family Medicine residency programs. I'm in my 27th year as the executive director of this great organization. I sincerely hope that that means sometime soon I should know kind of what I'm supposed to be doing. So, it's a little unusual for a statewide association to be based in Wichita. Most are really, as you know, up in Topeka. But our board feels that it's very appropriate for us to be here. It is the home of family medicine in the state of Kansas, here in Sedgwick County, because of our strong department of family and community medicine at KU Wichita and the residency programs that I mentioned earlier. And it works well for me as well, as Pat and I have lived here for over 40 years. He's been a business owner, and we have raised our daughter here. So this award is one that I would like to share with our KAFP team. I respectfully point to the great work of our physician leaders, my staff members, and others who are all equally deserving. They just might not have been at it quite as long as I have. The word lifetime in this ward is a little bit intimidating, I'll just share with you. Let's talk about a lifetime for a moment. Did you know that in the year 1900, a man's average life expectancy was only 46.3 years, and a woman's, while better, was still only 48.3 years? And yet, by the year 2012, a man's average life expectancy was 76.4 years, and 81.2 years for a woman. That's a 60% gain in longevity. To what can we attribute this huge gain? Medicine, you say? Yes, medicine has made great strides. We have life-saving therapies, treatments, drugs, cures, amazing things that were probably not even dreamt of in the year 1900. But the fact is that 80% of the gains in life expectancy during the last 2 centuries are directly attributable to public health. The measures that are taken in public health, not really advances in medicine, wonderful as they are. So I'm talking about some things that we may take for granted, unless something goes horribly wrong, as it has recently in Flint, Michigan, with the lead contamination there. I'm talking about clean air, clean water, sanitation, immunizations, yes, tobacco control, and tracking and prevention of infectious disease. I stand here as a representative of the many physicians in private practice that I mentioned earlier to make this point to you. Our private health care system depends upon a strong public health infrastructure. The Public Health Foundation, laid by visionaries such as Dr. Samuel Crumbine in the earliest 20th century and Dr. Doran Fredrickson in later 20th century and on into the 21st, are the bedrock of our healthy community. So our family physicians and other physicians in Sedgwick County depend upon the county to support a strong health department. I was privileged to know Dr. Fredrickson before his untimely death, and I'm quite sure that he would be very pleased to know that you have adopted this proclamation and we're celebrating National Public Health Week in our city and county. This is a time, as your proclamation said, for community measures to take the opportunity to make some small changes, to make the healthy choice the default choice. It offers you the opportunity as well to celebrate challenges already met through great public health and to look to the future. There is more to be done to support a strong public health system for Sedgwick County so that our future will be a safe and healthy place for our children and grandchildren. Thank you once again to everyone involved in the nomination and selection process for this terrific honor. I accept it humbly and gratefully with recognition that the contributions of others have made it possible. Thank you.
And congratulations, Carolyn. I appreciate those comments. I have some commissioners who want to say a few things. Commissioner Norton?
Well, congrats, Carolyn. We really appreciate you being here today and representing what all of us want in our public health segment around our county. We want the community to be healthy and happy and stable, and it takes a lot of people hitching up to the wagon and pulling that to make sure that everybody gets a chance to have a healthy life and a happy life. I would be remiss if I didn't say that we're saddened that Ron and Pat Fredrickson could not be here today. You know, they've been here, and that's Doran's parents.
Yes.
They've been here at every one of these proclamations for many years.
Yes.
and they so honored their son's work, were so proud of him, and it added to the event and the proclamation. So I'm saddened they're not here. My only comment is that I knew Doran pretty well. He was the health officer very early in my county commission career, and I can remember very often, and I tell this story, that he would whisper in my ear about how important public health is to our community. And he was a trained doctor, a pediatrician, a teacher, and yet he knew that public health, even though medicine is critically important,
Right.
and the medical community is much the foundation of a healthy community, so was public health. And he reiterated that to me over and over and over. In fact, he inspired me to go through the Kansas Leadership Program and then the National Leadership Program, which has given me a basis for really understanding public health at a deep level. And I wouldn't have had any of those experiences, that knowledge, that understanding, that care for public health if it hadn't been for Doran Fredericks. And so I'm so honored that you've received this and that you've dedicated your life, much like Doran had, to public health and our community.
Thank you for your kind words.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Unruh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I just want to add my congratulations and second the comments of Commissioner Norton, but I just wanted to, it struck me that one of the phrases that Becky used in her introduction of you is that you challenge the status quo, and I think that's a good description of Dr. Frederickson's legacy that he's left all of us, to challenge the status quo to make our community better. So it's good for us to remember the legacy of Doran, and it's good for us to recognize your efforts. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's not always comfortable, but it's probably a good thing.
It is
Thank you.
a
I
good
appreciate
thing.
that.
Well, again, congratulations. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item G, proclamation declaring National Walking Day.
All right. Commissioners, I do have another proclamation to read. And is Jennifer Thompson here today? Jennifer Thompson, all right. You come to the podium. I will go ahead and read this proclamation. It says, whereas cardiovascular disease is a leading cause of death in the United States and accounts for 1/3 of all deaths, and stroke is the number 5 cause of death in the United States and is a leading cause of disability. And whereas the direct and indirect costs of cardiovascular diseases, including lost productivity, are an estimated $316.6 billion, and obesity is a significant factor driving healthcare spending. And whereas regular physical activity can reduce cardiovascular disease risk and may increase life expectancy, but only 36% of children and 44% of adults get the recommended amount. And whereas moderate physical activity has many proven benefits for an individual's overall health, including controlling body weight, blood cholesterol, and blood pressure. All of these changes help reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke. And whereas on National Walking Day, the American Heart Association encourages all Americans to take a 30-minute walk with family, friends, and colleagues, and to share their minutes walked on social media with hashtag HeartWalkICT. Whereas on National Walking Day, April the 6th, the American Heart Association calls on everyone to wear sneakers, walk for 30 minutes, and start a regular walking program, and encourages Americans to become more physically active by walking. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Jim Howell, Chairman of the Board of County Commissioners, do hereby proclaim April the 6th, 2016 as National Walking Day in Sedgwick County, and urge all citizens to show their support for walking and the fight against heart disease. Commemorate this day by taking time to walk. Jennifer Thompson, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and get the board's support here. Commissioners, do I have any motions on this?
I move that we adopt the proclamation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Thank you. And I'd like to ask you to say a little something if you don't mind.
Oh, I'd be glad to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners. My name is Jennifer Thompson. I am the Executive Director for the Wichita Metro Office with the American Heart Association. And I just want to encourage everybody to take some time, lace up your sneakers. We've provided you with some shoelaces, and go for a walk today. 30 minutes of exercise is great. If you are already physically active and exercise is a regular part of your routine, do a little something extra today. Park a little further away from the door, take the stairs instead of the elevator, do a little something extra to promote that physical activity. 80% of all heart diseases and stroke are preventable, and exercise is a key component to that. So thank you very much for this proclamation, and if anybody has any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
Well, all right. Well, thank you. I want to say congratulations, and thank you for coming out and sharing the ideas with us. I know that my wife and I do like to walk as much as possible. We have a family dog, and it has been her favorite thing to do is to go walking every day. If we get that chance to go do that, it's been a lot of fun for us as a family to do that. Commissioner Peterson has a comment.
Well, thank you. Congratulations on the proclamation, and just with the nice spring weather that we have out there, it's a great opportunity.
Thank you.
For folks to step out. Excuse me. It's just to step out at this time, and there's a number of paths right here within just stepping outside the courthouse and around downtown, as well as parks throughout the community. And we've got some great trails out at Sedgwick County and Sedgwick County Park in Lake Afton.
Congratulations. I'll give you a hand of applause.
Thank you.
All right.
I will mention we do have two organized events today, one at noon at Central and Main downtown, and one at Coke Arena at Wichita State, if anybody would like to come out and take a walk with us today.
Very good. All right. Madam Clerk, we have more business. Next item, please.
Planning Department. Item H, proposed amendment to expand the Garden Plain urban area of influence.
Let's see here. Dale Miller, Planning Staff. Commissioners, this is a request by the City of Garden Plain to expand their existing urban area of influence. If you remember back in October, the Commissioners approved the urban area of influence and a map that shows the geography of each city's urban area of influence. That's what's shown here on the slide. The geography outlined in red is the individual urban area of influence boundaries for each of the cities in the county that has an urban area of influence. The significance of the urban area of influence is that if there are zoning cases that occur in that area, then that city's planning commission has to be given an opportunity to hear the zoning case as part of the official review procedure. And as you can see here, Garden Plains is here in the west, and it's one of the smaller, if not the smallest, of those that were established back in October of 2015. Let's see here. This is a detail of what Garden Plain is requesting. If you can see, the area with the red dashed line is the area that Garden Plain is requesting. It's basically 6 square miles in a rectangle. The dark line here is the existing city limits for Garden Plain, and I did a quick calculation this morning. I believe it's approximately 610 acres inside the city limits of Garden Plain. Then the blue area is the area that was established as their urban area of influence back in October, and then subsequent to that establishment, then obviously they've asked for it to be expanded out to the area that's outlined in red. This request did go to the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, and after a hearing there, the Planning Commission recommended the area that's outlined in yellow, basically 4 square miles surrounding the city. Some of the data that was discussed at Planning Commission involved the fact that over the time period from 2005 to 2014, Garden Plain added in a typical period, in a typical year, 3 new dwellings. There was a shorter time frame where they were approximately 4 dwelling units per year were being added. Garden Plain's estimated 2014 population is 879. Ranks 14th in terms of the cities in the county, and that
By 2035, it is projected that they would add 121 people to grow to 1,000 people, assuming an average household size of 2.5 people per household. That equates to a projected need for 48 dwelling units over the next 20 years, or 2.4 dwelling units per year. Some of the environmental issues that Garden Plain has to deal with are floodplains, and that's what is depicted in the blue linear lines, and shows where they are relative to the city limits of Garden Plain and the proposed urban area of influence request. As you can see, on the west side of Garden Plain, there's a significant floodplain area, as well as one going through the east side. And then once you get past that, there's quite a gap there until you get to the next one. An aerial showing same boundaries, but as you can see, in the area that is being discussed, the existing uses are predominantly agricultural. There are a few scattered houses in the area, but predominantly the land that's being discussed is zoned RR, rural residential, and is used for agricultural purposes. Inside the city limits, particularly down here in this addition here, you can see there are approximately 60 platted lots that are undeveloped at this time. There's also undeveloped land here in the northeast quadrant and the northern portion of the city limits of Garden Plain that are undeveloped. This subdivision is developing. There are a few lots left. That's a closer view of the Pretty Flowers addition and the platted lots that at the time of this photograph had not been developed. I drove out there and looked at the site, and it appears to be very similar in terms of the streets. There may be a few more houses in this area, but the streets are pretty much the same configuration as the photograph shows. And then this is the subdivision to the north that is a little more developed, and there's Highway 54 up here, and then that's the main approach to Garden Plain. This area is in the city limits and is undeveloped. That's part of the existing urban area of influence that was granted, and that's what the blue line shows. Mr. Hubert, as a member of their planning commission, is here today and would be able to make comments and answer detailed questions about their request. And if you have any questions of me, I try and take care of those now.
All right. Well, thank you, Director Miller, and appreciate the good presentation. I have comments from Commissioner Peterjohn.
Question I'd like to bring up. I understand this came up in front of the MAPC twice. Could you go into a little bit more detail on what happened and why it was a little bit, why it wasn't quite as, why it was more complicated than your typical case in front of the Planning Commission?
As you may recall, the urban area of influence replaces what was the original zoning area of influence. The zoning area of influence had been incorporated as a portion or part of the Unified Zoning Code text, and the map was adopted by reference. And so in order to make changes to the code, that requires a supermajority vote, in this case 8 out of the 14 planning commissioners. At the meeting, the original vote was 7-2 to approve, and it was thought at that time that they needed 8 votes to approve it, and so even though it was a 7-2 vote in favor of the yellow outline, Planning Commission and the applicants were advised that the request failed. After that, legal staff did some more research and determined that when we converted the zoning area of influence to the urban area of influence, we did not make it a part of the text. The map was not officially adopted, it was just referred to, and once they realized that, then that made it to where it was just a simple majority to approve the request. And so we took it back to Planning Commission for them to confirm that they would not have changed their vote had they known that at the original vote, and their consensus was that no one would have changed their vote. So a 7-2 vote became an approval vote, and the vote today only requires a simple majority as well.
Okay. Let me go ahead and ask the public if they have any comments on this agenda item and they want to address the commission. Please come up to the podium and state your name and address, please.
Just the right time. Good.
Somewhere, I don't know how they get.
Yeah, he said it was just right over here. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present. My name's Randall Hubert. I live at 150 South Bluebells Court in Garden Plain, Kansas, and I'm a member of the Garden Plain Planning Commission, and they've asked me to present our request to you today. Hello, Counselor Yost. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Randall.
Let's see. On behalf of the Garden Plain Planning Commission, we are making this request for modification of the urban area of influence boundary for Garden Plain. Mayor Larry Lampe with Garden Plain submitted that to the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission right after we received word that the vote had changed and the area had shrunk down. We did have 36 square miles, and the new urban area of influence was 0.7 of 1 mile, and so the council and the planning commission was rather surprised with how that came out, and I'll talk about that in a little bit here as we proceed. This is the boundaries that Mayor Lampe submitted to the Metropolitan Planning Commission. The purpose for our request is to protect the integrity of the lifestyle currently existing in and surrounding the city and the community of Garden Plain, and that includes those outlying areas. We want to provide a local government body for the local citizens to present issues affecting them that's convenient. One, we meet at 7 o'clock at night rather than in the afternoon as the Metropolitan Planning Commission does. We're also very close to those people in that area that are going to have issues, whether they are seeking changes or whether they're opposed to it. And of course, whether it's a positive request or whether they oppose to it, they can speak to local members of the board who are more familiar with the area, and most likely people they probably know. And then those same requests can be forwarded to the Metropolitan Planning Commission. And lastly, to have formal input over infrastructure and development patterns that will impact Garden Plain government, the citizens there, and also the citizens surrounding that in future years. The changes were made in October of 2015. The new areas that were adopted were keyed to growth projections in the Sedgwick County Community Investment Plan that was approved in August of 2015. And this is a map of the old zoning area of influence for each of the cities. The little arrow right here is Garden Plain, as Mr. Miller pointed out to you. And then this is the new map with the new urban area of influence. The new urban areas are shown in the light blue. As you can see, Garden Plain is extremely small. This is a little close-up of the new urban area of influence. You've taken a look at this map. Again, our request was the area outlined in red, and then the Metropolitan Planning Commission staff recommended the yellow boxed-in area. On this particular map, I'll try to get the pointer here, although it's a little hard to see. This area shown up top here north of Highway 54 was recently annexed, along with this area on the south side of 54. The comprehensive map was in large part based upon a 9-year-old published Garden Plain comprehensive plan. And those figures, that map was published in 2007. So the data for that would have been for the 5 to 10 year period before 2007. And the council and planning commission all felt that it does not adequately represent our recent growth and changes in the area. There was some type of miscommunication. We never could exactly figure out what had happened, but the council, I don't think, or the planning commission were not really aware of the drastic change that was going to happen and that it was going to be based on the old comprehensive maps. And so we were caught somewhat off guard, and whether we should have or not, that may be another good question. But in any event, that's how we got into this position to start with. And we felt that we weren't aware of what the representations that were made from the clerk to the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. I don't think the council or the planning commission was aware of the statements that were made, and I think the planning commission, Metropolitan Planning Commission, had relied on those. Let's see. We submitted our request again. We've kind of covered those boundaries, and I'll just move forward on that. Garden Plain is acceptable with the commission staff's recommendation that was made in February, that was and approved over there and sent forward to you. We are accepting of that recommendation. It's the mayor made the boundary request that he made was right after the changes were originally made, so I just wanted to be aware of that. The basis for our request, we ask that you adopt the findings and recommendations in the Metropolitan Staff's report that's dated February 18th and the recommendations and vote of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission as they modified it on our eastern boundary. Our population growth has been 6.25% from 2000 to 2010. Our 2000 population was 797, and in 2010 it was 849. Our housing growth rate change cited in the report is based on the years from 2005 to 2014, added 24 dwelling units, and I believe they found the average on that to be 3 per year. We would note that from 2012 to 2015, in the last 3 years, we've added 18 new dwelling units. That's an average of 4.5 new units per year and would be a growth rate of 5.2%. And that would be greater than the percentage cited in the staff report if you look at the 3 most recent years of growth. We did annex in 2014 the 233 acres east and north of the city, and there's ongoing efforts with an owner on the west side of Garden Plain for an additional, it's about 36 to 40 acres, and those discussions are ongoing. That particular area is shown in the red right here. That's the 40 acres, and again the 233 acres would be this area up in here that was annexed in 2014. Gas service, there are 36 dwellings outside of Garden Plains city limits that are on Garden Plains gas line. Many of those are located on the old Highway 54, which is Harry Street, near 311th Street on the west side of the city. That's a little map of those homes that are west of Garden Plain. Our water service, we have 22 houses outside of the city limits that are currently using Garden Plain water. Our sewer service, we would note that our new sewer plant on the southern border of the city was not included within the projected growth area that we were given recently. And that was, I think, based on the 2035 growth map. And there's another 3 dwellings just on the south side of the city that are on our sewer also, and we have additional capacity of approximately 30%. The sewer plant is shown on this map. It's this little blue box down here at the bottom. And then the homes that are on our sewer line are in this area that also were not included in the urban area of influence. Garden Plains provides police protection to both the city, and we assist Sedgwick County frequently in those outlying areas. There are 3 fairly large housing developments, one directly on the south side of the city, another one in that area near 311th Street to the west, and another older area that's approximately about 20 to 25 years old on the southwest area. And they assist in all those areas. And the older area I referred to in the southwest quadrant of the city, that area's been there quite a while with sewer lagoons and water, and there has been some rumblings that there may be some future pollution problems in that area, which may require them to go on to city sewer and water, but we'll see what happens with that. Lastly, the City of Goddard recently has their new project, which I think is going to cause a lot of growth in the Goddard area, but it's also going to enhance all the western portion of Sedgwick County, and I think that will impact Garden Plains to some extent, as the Walmart did. We're just 5 miles from Goddard, so we're very close to them, and I think that will impact increased growth in our area also. I want to thank you on behalf of the mayor, the city council, and the city planning commission. I thank you for allowing us the opportunity, and I can try to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hubert, for the comments and presentation. Since we're still on asking the audience if they have any comments, let me go ahead and finish that. Does anybody else in the audience want to speak to the commission on this agenda item? Okay, see, now I'm sure we'll have questions for you, Mr. Hubert, but right now I want to recognize Commissioner Peter John.
Well, I was going to begin with some questions. First, thank you for coming down and presentation. After we had gone through the urban area of influence mapping, and you all had pointed out the fact that you did have that city sewers facility on the south side that was excluded, wasn't intentionally, but since it's physically separate from the rest of the city, that was not part of the map, and that I had told the mayor that obviously we wanted to include all incorporated areas into the urban area of growth. The question I'd have, we talked a little bit about housing. Do you have any idea at all in terms of the number of platted lots in the city of Garden Plain, and how that number has changed at all in the time you've been on the Planning Commission, and how that would change under the map that's before us today?
Well, I live out in Pretty Flowers Addition. It's about 3/4 full in the first phase, and I believe there's another, I want to say 60 lots in that second portion. I'm not sure where they're at on the development on that. One of the issues that we had with the maps was those floodplain areas. I know the staff report talked about there was 200 and some available acres, but large portions of 2 of those areas have floodplain in them. So, and didn't really recognize it the first time around, but got to looking at the map and looking at those numbers, and I thought, well, that's really going to adversely affect the ability to do much with any of those areas for a developer. So I don't know. I don't know that I answered your question. I can try to get you information if you'd like me to.
Well, the question I had was obviously we were trying to downsize and protect people's ability to control their own property, and having a government that they can't vote on, having a say on what they can do with their property is obviously one of the concerns. And we were trying to come up with a right size on this, and we had a lot of discussion and a lot of back and forth in terms of trying to figure out what the right dimension is. And since your city is less than 1 square mile, if it's 610 acres, is that roughly correct?
I don't know exactly what that is. I'll take his word for it.
Okay. Well, we'd be putting in, if we adopt this, we'd be expanding it give you roughly 3 square miles in addition to the mile where the city itself is located in that area. And there's an awful lot of ag land and land that I have a hard time seeing developed anytime in the near future. And of course, the recent annexation is a lot of raw land too. So I really wanted to try and didn't want to reopen this whole issue since we'd settled it. But since we had excluded this one part of the city of Garden Plain, I wanted to explain to my colleagues why I had told the mayor that obviously we'd want to include anything that's incorporated into the city into that area and have it included going forward. So I don't know if you have any comment on that, but that was my reason for when I spoke with in front of the Planning Commission out in Garden Plain. Obviously that was one thing that I knew we needed to get right.
And yeah, we appreciated you coming out and answering questions. I think everybody understood a little bit better how we got to where we were, and that was very helpful. So,
well, I wanted to get that on the record for this discussion today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a couple of questions myself. So, has Garden Plain updated the comprehensive plan?
Well, we did it in 2007. That was when we updated it, and we haven't updated it since. But we're definitely talking about that now. But we've kind of got behind the 8 ball, obviously, and that's where this problem came up. So
the timing of this is curious to me because we just finished our comprehensive plan, I guess. So again, we've defined these boundaries just a few months ago, and it's surprising to me that would be a request this soon. My understanding of the urban area of influence is that we want to ensure that when cities have things that happen just outside the city limits, they have some ability to weigh in on those projects so that they don't end up with something that's really adverse to the city that may be annexed at some point in the future, or if they're expected to provide services, for example, to something outside the city limits. For example, you mentioned that there was some homes that have water and sewer service and gas service that are actually outside the city limits right now. So again, I think those are some reasonable reasons why the urban area of influence needs to exist. But I guess I'd ask a couple of questions on that. Have you had any development outside the city limits that you can speak of?
Well, definitely the housing unit on the south side. There's 5-acre lots down there. I'm going to guess on the number of homes, but I'll bet I moved out there in 2011, and when I moved out there might have been 3 houses out in that area, and there's probably 15 to 20 there now.
This is in the addition that you live in?
No, this would be an area just outside the city limits on the south side of Garden Plain.
Okay. Not the Pretty Flowers Estates?
No,
not that.
It's called the Heimerman Edition.
Okay.
But it's not within city limits.
Anyway, I guess my thought is that I think the urban area of influence is intending to project where the city is going to grow and to anticipate trying to coordinate things that might impact the city. Again, I don't know how many square miles the city actually has homes. I guess the city limits are much larger than the actual area where the homes are right now because the limits were just expanded, as you just mentioned.
Right, from that annexation, yes.
Right. So there's a I don't know if you can kind of guesstimate, is the city limits right now include to say about 50% of that is developed and half of it is non-developed, or can you? What I'm getting to right now is I'm just guessing at this, but it looks to me like the city limits has about a square mile of land within the city limits. It's really very rough. Maybe I'm off a little bit there, but of that 1 square mile, only about half that looks like it's developed right now.
That's probably fairly accurate, but you've got floodplains where a lot of that is where you couldn't develop if you wanted to. I don't have that map that he had, but I've both on the west side and on the east side, and actually on the very east side of Garden Plain, which goes through Pretty Flowers Edition that I live in. Actually, there's a lake behind me, but that's part of the floodplain area. So there's significant portions that you couldn't put homes in.
The entire 1 square mile on the northeast part of the proposed urban area of influence. I don't think, as I looked at the aerial map of that, I don't think there's any homes in that 1 square mile at all.
That's that newly annexed area, I think, that you're referring to.
But it even goes out beyond that. It goes out to the section
right on the north side. Yes. Right. No, there's nothing in those new areas yet.
A whole square mile of ag land that is being brought inside the urban area of influence. There's not a single home.
Right, and it's still zoned ag at this point. That just came in within the last year and a half.
In fact, I think the northwest quadrant is similar to that. I don't see any homes over there either. I'm not confident about that, but I was looking at aerial maps.
Well, and again, that's, part of that area, but a lot of that area is floodplain too.
Right.
I mean, not the whole thing, but fairly significant portions of that are low-lying areas. So there's not going to be much anybody's going to be able to do with that.
Okay. I would agree with Commissioner Peterjohn. I think that the wastewater treatment plant really ought to be part of the urban area of influence. That makes sense to me. I guess my opinion is when you look at the unincorporated part of the county that's brought into the urban area of influence, and considering the city limits includes a lot of undeveloped land, I think if you were to project rapid growth at the rate that you guys have been building homes, you said about 4.5, I believe. 4.5 homes per year, roughly.
Right.
If they all grew in the same direction, I'm not sure that you should hit that limit in my lifetime. I mean, it seems like this is a long ways away from the city limits.
Well, I think there's some concern that northwest area is kind of between Old Highway 54 and 54, where they would anticipate, I would presume, especially along 195th Street, that would hopefully be businesses moving into that area versus homes. The other concern is the development I discussed, the Hiram addition on the south. You've got a lot of homes with 5-acre lots. There's also the Koenig addition, which is kind of southwest of town, that at some point you end up with your town surrounded by homes all on 5 acres, and then at some point where they're going to, if they request to come in for sewer and water service, your expenses for that are going to be extremely high.
Let me make one final comment and ask you to address my comment, I guess. But looking at the other cities across the county, it looks to me like they have irregular urban area of influence boundaries, because it looks to me like they've been very thoughtful trying to figure out where growth is going to happen potentially. And they don't draw those boundaries in such a way that they're trying to judiciously bring in lands they believe that they're going to need to have some type of influence on, but they're very, very small amounts of land. Again, they think they're going to be able to grow out to those boundaries within, let's say, 10 or 20 years, and they're based on where they think they're going to grow around the city. In other words, they're not really much larger than that, and they're not smooth boundaries necessarily. They're basically jagged boundaries for the most part that encompasses the areas they really think they're going to grow in. Whereas this one is just 4 square miles. And I guess this one really stands out to me as being the method to develop these lines was to my opinion, it seems a little bit less thoughtful. In other words, it wasn't based on where you think you're going to grow. It's simply just been a very, very large area around the city. And so I guess I see this as, it appears to be a little bit different than what I see in other cities and how they've developed those boundaries.
Well, I've got that map back there a little bit. I think if you look at Cheney, I know there's significantly large areas they've pulled in. You also look at Hayesville, there were significantly large areas. In Goddard, there's significantly large areas. So I'm not sure that I disagree or agree with you on that particular point. One of the concerns was our more recent growth and the fact our map was out of date. I agree with you on that, and we would like to get that up to date. But the other concern that was expressed at the Planning Commission meeting was local citizens being able to have access to the Planning Commission at a local level, where your citizens that live right near Garden Plain, rather than have to come all the way downtown Wichita, address it to people that aren't familiar with their particular area, that they're going to have a local government that can address the issues that they have. It's not going to be binding on them because those members, they didn't vote for them or whatever, but they can express their concerns, they can answer their questions, and that would then be included in the report or the recommendation that would go down to the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. I know at least one of the citizens expressed concern that her particular development, that she wants to address it to a local board who understands what her concerns and problems and issues are, and know that those representatives are going to be hearing her concerns. Not that the Metropolitan Planning Commission isn't going to be open to hearing those, but that was one of the concerns, is having that local board.
And along that line, let me just say that when the city chooses to weigh in on some issue that is inside the urban area of influence, for that to be overridden ultimately has to come before the Board of County Commissioners, where it requires a supermajority. Simple majority by the city and supermajority by the county commission. So again, the elected officials that represent those folks in the unincorporated part of the county requires a supermajority of our board to, in fact, go against the city's wishes inside the urban area of influence. So again, if it was a simple majority, I would be more inclined to grant a much larger area, but it's not. The city has more authority essentially than the county does in terms of what can happen in those unincorporated parts of the county. Happen to be inside that boundary line around that city. So I guess I'm concerned about granting a very large area that doesn't seem to have any prospect whatsoever of growing into that large area in the next 2 decades. So that's my concern.
My recollection was that, and maybe Mr. Miller can better answer the question than I, but I think actually if the Metropolitan Planning Commission approved the request, it came to you, and I think if you send it back to them for additional information, when it comes back, then it just requires a simple majority again.
That is true. It takes a second round. We can send it back to MAPC, and then when it comes back to us a subsequent time, then we have a declining requirement for in other words, a supermajority the first time we touch it, and a simple majority the last time we touch it. And so you're correct. It's a declining vote requirement of the Board of County Commissioners. I agree with what you just said, but I guess initially, as we allow the cities to determine what's good for them, it requires a simple majority by the city's planning commission. It requires a supermajority by Board of County Commissioners unless we want to go through a second round. So I guess essentially, again, we go back to that term of regulation without representation. We're essentially allowing a city to determine what's allowed and what's not allowed on people who that they were not able to in any way vote for those people that sit on these boards. And so I guess I just have a concern about granting a large area around the city where that regulation is in place, when the Board of County Commissioners, again, it's up to us, I guess, to determine at some point whether something should go forward or not. But yet we've got a higher requirement, a supermajority requirement for us to determine what we think is best, whereas the city only has a simple majority. So again, to grant large areas is a concern of mine. I'm a little bit sensitive to something that appears to be, this is rough numbers, 300% size, 300% larger than the city itself, and in fact about half the city right now is undeveloped. And so, just by simple math, we're about 600% larger than the actual developed part of the city is the area that we're talking about putting under this higher level of regulation. If that makes any sense. I'm just concerned about that. I guess you have that puzzle. But
when you use the term that half the city's underdeveloped, I guess I'm not agreeing with you on that point. I know Pretty Flowers, I think, has 12 lots still open in their phase 1, and on the north end of the city, I think there might be 10 or 12 out there. I know that developer, I believe, went bankrupt. There was some sheriff sale on some of those lots, but there's not that many lots up on that end of the town that are still available. It's not
those areas I'm talking about. I'm talking about the areas that were large agricultural pieces that were brought into the city recently. You said in 2014 they annexed large agricultural parts around the city, brought those inside the city limits, but they're not developed at all. And so those areas, if you count those as being inside the city, it looks to me like it's about a 1 square mile of land, but about half that has homes and businesses and stuff on it. The other half, it seems to be undeveloped.
Well, and I don't view the recently annexed areas as being anticipated probably more for housing growth, as I think maybe part of it would possibly be, but I think more they were anticipating possible business growth in those areas. So,
okay. I have commissioners that want to speak to this. Commissioner Ranzau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, you had talked about the 5-acre lots around the city, and how does that relate to this urban area influence? You have 5-acre lots, which you appear to say weren't necessarily desirable by the city. So how does this help you by expanding this?
Well, I think basically, I'm going to go back to a class I had in college, which had to do with planning or whatever. Talked about cities growing and be able to have at least some ability to affect the growth and where it goes and so forth, such that they don't end up with having huge high costs, and eventually if they need to take sewer lines in or water lines into those areas, and you've got large geographic areas between homes, those expenses of course are much higher than if you have, the platted lots with smaller lots or so forth. But I think a developer is going to want to do what he's going to do, basically, but you have a discussion between the city and the developer, then those points can be brought to the Metropolitan Planning Commission. I don't know that our vote is binding on the Metropolitan Planning Commission, so but you bring out the points. One thing I will notice is most of the Planning Commission issues that come to us, frequently our citizens come to us and really don't have any idea what they need to do or not do. And so they come to us with questions. I'm thinking about doing this. What are the regulations? What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? And so, to a large extent, as a body, we provide a lot of information to those people to help them with the process and understand the process. Now, granted, the Metropolitan Planning Commission will have that same ability, but they're going to have a lot more of those issues to deal with than they have in the past, I think, because of the smaller urban areas of influence that you've created.
Okay, well, I just didn't quite answer my question. So you have this issue of 5-acre lots, which you're concerned about, the city's concerned about. How will having this urban area influence change that? I mean, you could use this then to influence the size of lots, perhaps keep them from building out there, or what? How is this going to change?
Well, you're going to be more aware of what the issues are that may affect the city.
And so what's the end point? I mean, if they build it, they build it, right?
Well, if you have an annex, that I don't know that you can prevent it, but you, as a city,
but is that the goal
local
of the city?
Homeowners, local property owners are going to get notice of any changes that they want to do as far as zoning changes.
Right.
And this would give the city an opportunity to address any issues that they would see that might be related to the same things.
And would their intent then be to stop that from happening, or what?
I suppose it would depend on what the development was. I don't know.
Well, if they wanted 5-acre lots, that's the issue I'm talking about. You brought it up, said it was a problem.
I'm not saying it's necessarily a problem. I'm saying it could be an issue, depending on what area they're developing in. I mean, there's a lot of factors you'd have to take into consideration. But I think, cities have an interest in trying to, keep costs from being too expensive for possible extensions of sewer lines and water lines and so forth.
If it costs a lot to extend sewer and water, then why would they do it? They could simply say no.
I agree.
So then it's not a problem. If you have that choice to say yes or no.
That's true. But the cities would like to have some input on the growth and development surrounding their city in the event in the future those areas, let's say they, because of all the lagoons, let's say they develop pollution problems, then those citizens seek to come into the city. The costs of extending sewer and water to 5-acre lots are a lot more than they would be for smaller acres. That's what I'm trying to point out.
Right. And if the homeowners want that, they could bear that burden if they so choose, or the city could decide to say no. I'm just trying to see.
I agree.
See, I'm not sure there really is a problem here, and I'm concerned that the intent is for the city to perhaps try and stop some of these things. I mean, we have an interest in protecting property rights and allow people to develop their land. Another option is for the city to allow is to annex 5-acre lots and allow them to keep their existing sewer systems, not install sewer or water. So there's lots of options out there, I think.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Peter John?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hubert brought up an interesting point that I wanted to kind of throw out there in terms of why these boundaries vary from city to city. And my intent had been to point out the fact that when the maps inadvertently excluded that one small portion of Garden Plain, obviously the area between it and the existing city, this commission's been very generous to a lot of municipalities that have come in here requesting island annexations. I can think of several communities where we've done that in the past, although Garden Plain certainly not the most in that regard. We've had other communities that have done this much more so for varying reasons that go to each community, and that's had an impact on the map. And when you raised the point, Mr. Hubert, that these maps vary community by community, I would point out that the island annexations, and I know a couple of them out in the western part of the county, from as far south as Clearwater and as far west as Cheney, both have cases where we've done island annexation since I've been on this commission, and I think that's had an impact on those maps. So that would be a factor in it, and I certainly wanted to put you all in the position that if there was an area where we had, in the drafting portion, excluded by accident, albeit a small part of the city of Garden Plain, from the urban area of influence, we wanted to get that back in and relook at the map, but my intent was not to generally reopen this broader issue because I don't want to see a whole group of cities basically saying, hey, we want to revisit the whole issue that we just addressed a few months ago. And so that's why I've struggled a little bit today, because it seems like we've got a very, I'm glad you guys came down from moving west from Viola Road, because that really, you're talking just pure farm country out there, and I can't imagine Garden Plain being out there anytime in the we're talking decades and decades down the line. But to basically move this issue forward, I'm going to, Mr. Chairman, make a motion to adopt the findings of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, amend the Garden Plain Urban Area of Influence boundary as recommended by the MAPC, and authorize the chairman to sign the resolution.
I'll second the motion.
All right, Commissioner Unruh, further comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just make a comment on the motion that I'll be supportive of. It seems to me, after reading the documentation and listening to the discussion today, that there's a legitimate reason for this community to ask for a revision of the urban area of influence. I probably could not support their original request, but I think after the compromise that the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission came up with, that I can support this compromise position. I think that it is the size of their area is not inconsistent with the other communities of like size in the county, and it seems like this is a reasonable and an equitable compromise position, so I'll be supporting. That's all I have.
Okay. Commissioner Ranzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just say that at this point, I can't be supportive of this resolution. including the waste treatment plant, is certainly reasonable, but adding 3 square miles to the city that's only 1 square mile, I don't believe is. I believe this urban area influence, which is not even in statute, it's outside of the state law, is something that is redundant and unnecessary. But nevertheless, even if you we're going to have an urban area influence, this one that's going to be changed to is much too large. I would argue that many of the cities throughout Sedgwick County have urban areas of influence that are too large as well. And I'm particularly concerned about the idea that the city's concerned about 5-acre lots and wants to use, and apparently would want to use this as a way to forestall or prevent some of those developments, which is very problematic in a free society which values property rights, particularly when we talk a lot about economic development. Some people want to build houses inside cities. Some people want to build houses outside of cities. We should allow that choice freely to happen and not create artificial and unnecessary impediments to that. So with that, that being said, my vote will reflect those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Commissioner Ranzau. I guess as we finalize this, I would agree with Commissioner Peterjohn. I'm a little uncomfortable with the proposal as it's presented to us. I do think an adjustment is needed. I would prefer if the boundaries reflected, I guess, where they anticipate growth actually to happen. Let's say over the next 2 decades or so. To me, that's a reasonable approach to this, and I don't, in my opinion, I don't perceive that's what this is today. So I would be supportive of that if I had that presented to me. I think right now, as it's presented, I'm going to probably vote no today. But I see no further comments today. Right now, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau.
No.
Chairman Howell.
No. Motion passes. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for the good discussion this morning. Madam Clerk, please, next item, please.
Planning Department. Item I. Zone change from SF20 single-family residential to LC limited commercial and creation of DP 339, the Redmond Commercial Community Unit Plan, on property located northwest of South 119th Street West and West Pawnee Avenue.
Dale Miller, Plain staff again. Commissioners, this is a fairly routine request for limited commercial zoning on property there that's outlined in the blue on the northwest corner of Pawnee and 119th Street. It's currently zoned SF5. It is over the 6-acre requirement. It's 8.3 acres for a community unit plan. They've submitted a community unit plan that is consistent with, particularly with the community unit plan that's across the street to the south, DP 312. Very similar development standards are proposed for the one to the north. At the Planning Commission, there were some neighbors there that expressed concerns, particularly wanting to know what the specific uses were, concerned about the location of dumpsters, where the parking would be, and the height of the masonry wall that's required along the west and north property line. The applicant agreed to an 8-foot tall masonry wall along those two property lines. The requirement is a 6 to 8 foot, and they readily agreed to the 8 foot to address the neighbors' concerns. Dumpsters are required to be located 20 feet away from property lines with single-family use. The neighbors were asking for 40 feet. They were also asking for parking to be required to be set back, but those two proposals were not included in the MAPC recommendation, which approved the request 8-0. Mr. Avey is here as the agent for the applicant, and I try and answer questions, and he certainly can answer detailed questions if you have any.
Very good. All right. I'd like to go ahead and ask the audience, is anybody who would like to speak to this agenda item? Okay, seeing none. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments? Commissioner Peterjohn.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not so much a question for Mr. Miller as just comments that we've been briefed on this by staff And my understanding is that this was approved without a dissenting vote at the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. If I'm wrong on that, I'll let Mr. Miller come up and correct me, but I do plan to be supportive of this motion today. And Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we adopt the findings of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, approve the zoning change in the CUP subject to MAPC approved conditions, authorize the chair to sign the resolution, and authorize the resolution to be published.
All right. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Commissioner Norton.
Dale, what is across the street to the east? And that's a church, isn't it?
Yes, there's a church here. Otherwise, the ground to the south is agricultural, and then the neighborhood to the north and west.
Because it's a church, are there any restrictions of like sale of beer or alcohol within a? I know there is schools, but is there going to be any restrictions that might come up later?
In the sense of a retail liquor outlet or a nightclub, a retail liquor outlet. We treat retail liquor stores as just a regular business. The state may have separation requirements from churches or schools, but the zoning code doesn't. But for nightclubs, which they have specifically prohibited from the CUP, there is a distance requirement for that.
I think we talked about that there would be some restrictions on some things that couldn't go in there. But a retail liquor store is not a nightclub.
Correct. It's just treated as
handled differently.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just know that church is growing, and they've got, I think all of that land is theirs. They've anticipated they may build larger. Yeah. And I would hate to think that we would later have conflict with some usages because the church is right across the street.
But yeah, from a zoning code standpoint, there isn't. Retail liquor stores are not treated any differently than any other retail business. Now, the state, again, like I say, in order to get a liquor license, they may have something, but the zoning code does not.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Commissioner Ransaw.
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
New business, item J, County Extension Quarterly Report.
All right. I'd like to welcome Zach Simon to the podium.
Good morning. Like I said, thank you for the introduction, Chairman. I'm Zach Simon. I'm the Agriculture and Natural Resources Extension Agent here in Sedgwick County with K-State Research and Extension. I want to share with you guys today just a little bit of background about who in general my constituents are real quick. There are in Sedgwick County 1,344 farms, and currently, according to the 2012 Ag Census, 75.3% of our county is in agricultural production. And then from a 2015 report done by Kansas Department of Ag, kind of my general constituents, this is their outputs for 2015, that 164.8 million. And I'll break those down here. So we see oilseed crops, which include sunflowers, canola, and soybeans, 34.1 million. Grain, which is wheat, corn, 95.1 million. Cotton, not a whole lot of cotton here. Beef cattle, dairy cattle and milk, poultry and egg, and other animals, which would be goats, sheep, and equine, horses. So I wanted to share with you guys a success story this morning. This past year, we had a new pest in Sedgwick County for the grain sorghum or milo growers here in the county, the sugarcane aphids. I found sugarcane aphids officially in Sedgwick County on July 29th. We had them in 2014, but very late in the growing season, and they were of no concern as the crop was mature and drying down at that point. So to find them this early was kind of nerve-wracking for us. Our neighbors to the south in Texas had been dealing with these for a few years and have seen some extreme devastation of their crops from these things. So these aphids feed on the sap of the grain sorghum plants here. They infest under the leaves and go up the stalks. Some of the big concerns are, you can see here, they produce their excrement. Honeydew on the left picture there is very shiny, sticky substance. That then grows some mold, which you see on the right, which can inhibit photosynthesis of the plant, as well as, they are sucking sap from these plants, reducing yield. And another big concern for these is harvestability. That is very, very sticky. It's like corn syrup. These are some pictures of some combines with aphids literally sticking to it. Makes the grain very sticky in the machine and inhibits the threshing of the grain as well. These pictures, it's just amazing how much these things can coat. Here's another. This is, in this picture, these are aphids stuck to the harvester. They just completely coated this. What we did is I found those July 29th. I worked with the specialist from Manhattan on K-State's campus, one of the entomologists, Dr. Brian McCornack, you can see here on the left standing next to me. I worked with a local producer who was willing to let us have a meeting in a shed. Everything fell together, and we had 86 people show up for this meeting with only 20 hours of notice. We utilized social media, text messages, and emails, as well as some phone calls. But very serious issues, so they were very interested in coming. The great part about having it at this farmer's in this shed is right next to the shed there was literally a field that had just been infested with this new pest. So we were not only able to go over a presentation and talk about this new pest and what we needed to do to treat this new pest, but we were able to actually go scout this field, show them what it really looked like in the field, and give them some hands-on experience. So K-State worked together when they realized this was a big issue with the extension agents in each county, and we came up with this mapping system to highlight, to give producers fair warning that they might be headed your way. This was the first map we produced on August 22nd, and I'll show you how fast these critters spread. The next week, a few more counties had lit up, and that was at the end of September. They spread like wildfire, but kind of the epicenter was here in Sedgwick County. We suffered some extreme yield losses. So immediately, too, we set out to get some experiments out in the field. This is kind of an overlay of a plot that we had here in Sedgwick County in a farmer's field. He donated a corner of his field for us to let us do some research to collect data because we had no data on this new pest in Kansas. There are 2 insecticides that we can use to treat this pest. And so we put the different rates of those out and replicated this data. And they were sprayed at what we were recommending to producers is the optimum time to spray, and then we sprayed again a week later to show a difference. Here you can see I talked about how that mold, the farmer did treat his field. You can kind of see in this corner, I know the picture might be a little bit hard to see, but you can see the plots within there that were treated because that mold did not grow on the leaves. You can see the darker areas, and then you can see the smaller, lighter blocks in there. Here's a picture you can see in the foreground, some very sickly looking plants, and behind is where it was treated, some much happier looking plants. Once again, they just destroyed these plants. So how much yield loss did we see in Sedgwick County? On the left there in that picture, you can see some heads from the untreated areas, and on the right was a treated area. So here's some yield data that we got together. Quickly, I just wanted to point out, along the bottom here, we have the different herbicide treatments, Savanto and Transform, and this UNT was the untreated plots. Trial 1, we saw a decrease from here of 77% from the treated to the untreated, and here a 73% decrease in yield from this treatment from the untreated. Over here, a little bit less, 60-some percent, and then down to 56% over here. So this last year, according to USDA, in Sedgwick County, we had 46,600 acres of grain sorghum planted. 4,400 of those acres were harvested. And we had just over 2.9 million bushels of grain sorghum produced in Sedgwick County last year. At today's cash price of roughly $3, that crop from last year is worth nearly $8.8 million. So doing some calculations of using some of that yield data, I figure hopefully Extension saved Sedgwick County producers roughly $5 million of income on their sorghum crop last year with the information that we were providing them. So with that, Kent Winter, a local Sedgwick County ag producer, is here to share some of his story.
Zach, thank you for the introduction. Again, my name is Kent Winter. I reside at 7359 North 215th Street West, northwest part of the county, the Andale Mount Hope, Colwich area. I'm fifth generation family farmer here in Sedgwick County, mostly a dryland operation there. Actually, my mother's ancestors arrived on the first train into Wichita in May of 1872. And my operation is half wheat and the other half being summer crops, with grain sorghum being a big part of that, also soybeans, corn, and alfalfa. Grain sorghum was what's passed down to me was local producers began growing it in the 50s, following the 5-year drought that my dad still talks about. 1957, when I was 2 years old, was the first year that he raised it. He brought it in for two reasons. He needed a crop other than alfalfa to rotate with wheat. Diversity is key with good agricultural production anywhere. The other reason is, and this goes for a lot of the other farmers in Sedgwick County, they had livestock operations. They were feeding. Grain sorghum or milo was the grain that we raised and stored on the farm and fed to the lamb feeding operation that we operated for a number of decades. So let me take you back. Let me set the table here a little bit. Last summer, August, was a very, very wet, what I call corn belt style rains that we were getting. Our summer crops by no means were in the bin, but they were looking very, very good at that time. I remarked to my wife following a crop tour that, Susan, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore because of the green and the lush conditions that we had. Suddenly we get word that this critter called the sugarcane aphid is headed our way, in my mind, up the I-35 corridor. It's an insect that I think has its origins down in Louisiana, South Texas, and as the name says, sugarcane aphid. That's what it was confined to. But for some unknown reason, it decided that it liked the taste of grain sorghum. Why, I don't know. Grain sorghum does happen to be a non-GMO crop. It's also gluten-free, but we're scratching our heads on that. But you know, you've got two reactions. Do you stand there like a deer in the headlights, or do you pick up the phone? Who are you going to call? Sedgwick County Extension. And my hat's off to Zach and others for reacting like they did to get this meeting in place. I remember, and like he said, it's less than 24 hours notice, I pulled up to this farmstead north of Garden Plain on the day of that meeting and had to park a quarter mile away, pickups lined on both sides of the road. The shed was full of farmers, and I remember distinctly Zach and his crew finding more chairs and dragging more chairs in to get everybody seated. And it says a lot for guys to drop what they're doing in the middle of the summer and come to a meeting like this. I won't say they were scared. Let's just say they were very concerned. They had a large amount of money invested in this growing crop that had good potential. And the expert he brought in from Manhattan, Kansas State, Brian McCormick, did an excellent job of presenting on how the best management practices for us to address this threat. It reminded me of the recurring line in the movie The Deer Hunter. One shot. You get one shot here to get it right. We're throwing $18 an acre at this thing. And we learned that timing is key. You want to be spraying when 20% of the plants in the field have 50 aphids per plant. How many is 50 aphids? The size of a quarter is 50 aphids. These conditions, 100-degree heat and wind, these things were reproducing very rapidly. We were looking at a situation where the population was growing exponentially. Don't ask me to explain this, but these critters reproduce and produce almost all females, and those females are born pregnant. And so each adult is responsible for producing another 1 to 3 insects per day. So this thing gets out of hand very quickly if you don't treat. So the other thing that we learned, that there were 2 insecticides available to use. One was better than the other, but it's going to cost more. It's going to give 3 weeks residual versus 2 weeks, and that happened to be the one that I chose. Another very important piece of information is that it's recommended highly that you use 15 to 20 gallons of water per acre to get this stuff on. Keep in mind, we're dealing with a canopy that is 4 to 5 feet tall, lush, and a lot of growth. The 5 gallons per acre that an airplane puts on is not enough. It's not good enough. So you're looking at ground rigs with a lot of extra hassle and expense to putting on 20 gallons an acre to get it right. That's what we did. Fast forward to the fall. And I also should mention, in addition to what Zach showed you, those plants that are affected, they don't stand very well, especially in the Kansas wind. They go down flat on the ground, and you don't get it all with a combine. You get a portion of it, and you have to slow way down and grind all that material through the machine. It's expensive. So fast forward to the fall harvest. I had my best harvest on record as a producer, and I give a lot of the credit to that, to the K-State Extension folks. They're populated statewide by good people like Zach Simon, who don't sit back and wait. They jump on things when it's time to, and get the necessary resources rounded up and get people involved at meetings to give us producers on the ag side a heads up on how to do it and what to do right. Thank you. I'll stand for questions now along with Zach if you have any.
All right, well, thank you so much for the good story there. I'm really impressed that we have someone in the community that can actually respond quickly and dynamically to a problem that probably had never been thought of before. So it's just tremendous to hear the way we responded. I like to call him Agent Simon because I like the name Agent. If I was an agent, I'd want to be called Agent Simon too. But Agent Simon is a smart guy, obviously, and he knows a lot about how to solve these kinds of problems. So I appreciate you stepping up and developing a really good plan on how to deal with this. Commissioner Peterjohn?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the presentation. This is probably the most unusual and the most quick responding extension report I can recall during the time I've had the privilege of sitting on the commission. Question I might have, since a sugarcane aphid, I assume is originally tied in with the sugar plant, and we don't have that here, what's the outlook for this year in terms of the sugar aphid, and what should anybody who's watching or seeing this think, do? I guess I'm going to try and see how many phone calls I can generate in your office, Agent Simon, but I'd like to get a better understanding, because obviously we've got some seasonal factors here that we don't have in the South. We've got normally a winter, although this was a very mild winter by comparison, but I want to get an idea what the forecast for 16 looks like with this, and could it go into other crops like, say, corn or other ones that obviously have, I mean, there's not that genetically, I think, that big a stretch between sorghum and corn, but please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, you're right. There isn't much genetically different. So kind of an outlook, the mild winter definitely was not a good thing for this. They are having issues with this pest right now in South Texas, so we are monitoring it. Here in a few weeks, I plan on having an update meeting towards the end of April with Dr. Brian McCornack, from the entomologist from K-State, again, having him down to kind of brief producers on what all we learned again last year with the research that we had in Sedgwick County and across the state. One negative going for us for this next year is we have lost one of the insecticides that we were able to use. We are down to one, so that's a challenge that we're going to face. They pulled the label on that. EPA.
Who's they?
EPA.
Oh.
So that'll be a challenge that producers will face this year. It's looking like we are going to have to deal with them. How soon, I don't know. So I'll be ready again in scouting fields and ready to hold meetings again if needed, and to consult with producers if they need my services.
Is there any sort of biological, entomological pests that, I mean, Anything that eats these aphids
Yes.
that people can use or rely on? Or?
Yes. So lady beetles, sweat bees or hoverflies, and lacewings are natural predators, as well as some parasitic wasps. We did see a lot of ladybugs late in the fall. However, it usually takes these predators several years to kind of come up to speed with this new pest. They don't want to waste their resources laying their eggs. It's generally the larvae that feed on these aphids. They don't want to waste their resources and laying eggs by a new potential food host that they're unsure of how stable they will be and how long. So I would say that we will see them catch up in a few years. Also, too, we're doing some research on certain grain sorghum varieties have shown some tolerance to these aphids much better than other varieties. So we'll be doing some research this year in Sedgwick County on that as well, seeing how the different varieties stack up against this pest. But we do expect them to be back this year. Hopefully not as bad. A lot of it will depend on the winds coming from the south.
Okay. And we think the other crops won't be affected?
They have been reported on corn, but they don't see it as a host. They might land on it, try it, and move on. I think my thinking, I can't prove this, but our thinking as of now is that they moved to sorghum just through natural genetic mutation, but moved to grain sorghum because it does have a higher sugar content in its sap than corn or other crops.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Norton?
I don't have a lot of comments, although it flashes me back to growing up in cotton country in Arkansas and trying to figure out how to take care of boll weevils when they became pesticide resilient, and continuing to test and whether you're going to spray it on or fly it on or what the newest thing was. So good work. I mean, I know we relied on our extension agents to come out to the fields and try to figure out what strain of boll weevil it was and how resistant they were and how to solve that. And if you've ever been a cotton farmer, you know boll weevils, if you let them go untreated, will tear your crop up and ruin you for a season. So it's very interesting that it's a small aphid and you think it's not much, but it can be devastating to the farmer. So good work.
Thanks
for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ranzau?
Yeah. What was the insecticide that you said you no longer can use?
Transform. And I forget who that's produced by. I don't remember if that's Dow Industries. I would have to look that up. I'm sorry.
And what was the rationale?
Not exactly sure. I think there was some concerns for bee health there.
Okay, so
I know the state is trying to work to get a Section 18, which would allow it to be an emergency use insecticide. They're trying to get that in place. That way, if we do have a severe infestation, they would like to have the two options for producers to use both insecticides.
Right. More intervention from an out-of-touch federal government, I'd say. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Unruh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Zach, I just want to thank you for the presentation and tell you that I have a new appreciation for ag science. This is really an interesting story that you've told us. I appreciate your expertise, and for both you and Kent, the way that you all have had a very significant impact on the economy of Sedgwick County. Sometimes we forget how important the ag economy is to the economic well-being of our region, and I know, Kent, you've been a leader in the ag community for years and been before us before. Appreciate your leadership, and Zach, as I said, this is very interesting, and I'm glad that you put your time in and got the expertise necessary to help our citizens in Sedgwick County. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I was just curious, Agent Simon, can you talk about how you might use drones to track this type of infestation in this field? Is that something that you're using to do aerial photography or to figure out where the problems actually exist?
Yes, the photo I had of the plots was from unmanned aerial vehicle, a UAV. We are using this. We plan to use them again. Have some. If you guys visit the extension Facebook page. I've got a really cool video up there of us actually flying a sorghum field with a UAV. We're using different filters on cameras to see if we can track infestation levels via flying a field in maybe 5 or 10 minutes versus taking a long time to manually walk through, 160-acre field or something like that. So we're doing that as part of our normal plot work as well. So we're trying to get a good handle on this and get as many useful tools as we can to producers.
Does the Extension Office provide that service to our resident farmers in Sedgwick County? They don't need to necessarily have that technology themselves. They can rely on you to help them with that?
Currently, we do not. With the licensing needed, you have to be a licensed pilot to fly at the heights that we're flying with these. These are very expensive aircraft, especially with some of the cameras and sensors. Pushing $10,000. So currently, we just have ones coming out of Manhattan and K-State Salina. So currently, no, we don't have it at a local level. And still, I don't know that we're quite up to speed with where we're at with the technology, knowing that we can give them useful information just yet.
Okay. Well, I'm disappointed to find out I have to be a pilot and all that, and the cost of it. I was hoping I'd come out and fly this around for you for a little bit, but I guess that's not going to happen.
Maybe we can work some now.
All right. I would just like to point out the first paragraph of your report, which I don't think you actually read, but I think it's important for people to hear this. Let me read part of this. It says there's 37 agricultural, food, and food processing sectors that you guys are tracking. And overall, they have a total direct output of $2 billion and $12 million, supporting 6,212 jobs in Sedgwick County. Those are some big numbers. Again, you have this broken down, very, very much detail in this report. So thank you for that. And to me, that sounds like a really extremely important part of our local economy. And I guess I'm just glad that the Extension Office is aware of what's going on around us and report these numbers once in a while. So thank you for that as well. Okay. Commissioner Peterjohn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to thank Mr. Winter and Agent Simon for this very interesting and unfortunately disturbing trend where we've got addressed, but I'm pleased to hear how it's being addressed, and I'm going to make a motion, Mr. Chairman, we receive and file this report.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and see no other discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Commissioner Ransaw.
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. Thank you very much for being here. All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
New business, item K. Update regarding Health Department's potential use of an immigration status questionnaire.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Yost, County Councilor. We had been asked to place this item on the agenda in light of our communications or lack thereof from the Department of Health and Environment. And Justin Wagner, Assistant County Councilor, is willing to make a presentation to you today about that. But you should know that I did hear this morning from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment by way of an email communication. We haven't had an opportunity to, I got it right before the commission was to meet, and I haven't had an opportunity to look at what they've actually said or what their response is. So it's going to be up to the commission whether or not you wish to pass over this item until another time.
All right. Well, the recommended action is to receive and file, so we're probably just receiving some information. And with that in mind, I would probably want to go ahead and move forward a little bit, is my opinion. Let's talk to commissioners first. Commissioner Peterjohn?
Well, I was just going to suggest that in light of the councilor's information, we just postpone this item a week and see where we stand next week.
And I'm open to that action as well. Commissioner Unruh?
I'd like to assume that was a motion by my colleague, and I'd second his motion.
I appreciate that. I've threw it out there just strictly for discussion purposes, but if there's more commissioners who agree, I guess I can turn it into one.
Let's see what. Let's hold off for just a moment, if you don't mind. Commissioner Ransaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Personally, I'd like to proceed with the presentation. This started several months ago when Sedgwick County asked the state of Kansas to limit participation or prevent illegal aliens from receiving welfare benefits as permitted under federal law. We have sent multiple letters to them. They've refused to respond, and I think the people of Sedgwick County need to understand the efforts that we have gone to. they responded this morning, I think, because they found out that we're going to actually talk to the people and let them know that they haven't responded. Personally, I want the citizens to understand the history and all the effort we've gone into and how we've been patient. We were going to put this on a few weeks ago, and they said give us some more time, and they've never done it. And so the only reason they're responding now, it's very clear, because we're going to present this to the people, and I think the people deserve to hear this. It's something they're interested in. I'd like to get closure on this. We've been patient and waiting far too long to get a response from Topeka, and people deserve to get an answer. But that being said, that's my opinion, and I'll support the will of the board.
I would also agree with your previous Commissioner's comments. I think the recommended action is just receive and file. So we're just discussing, I guess, our status, what has occurred up to this point. I don't see any harm in doing that. I think that in light of the email that you received, Counselor, I guess I'd like to see maybe some further update in the future. But as to draw a line in the sand and get us updated as to where we are currently, I don't see any harm in doing that. So I'd like to ask our Counselor Justin to come on up to give us that information if that's acceptable. And just to let you know, I don't know that we need to spend too much time on this. I'd just like to know what's occurred up to this point, and if you can kind of tell us, I guess, the steps we've taken so far, and that I don't know that we necessarily have any action I'm expecting necessarily from the board today, other than just simply receive and file the information you're presenting.
Yes, Chairman Justin Wagoner, Assistant County Counselor. I would be happy to provide a brief update on that too at the end of the presentation. I apologize because I'm struggling to see which one of these it is on here. There we go. Again, Justin Wagoner, Assistant County Counselor. I am here today to present just really a chronological update as to what's occurred on this item since you all approved the WIC grant back in October of last year. On October, I apologize, let me get this up.
Can you go to the first page, please?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize. If I could get some assistance, Kate, on that. Thank you. And as you will recall, on October 7th of last year, you all approved that grant. Just to explain, the grant was for funds that would be used, essentially they're pass-through funds from the United States Department of Agriculture. They're passed through the Kansas Department of Health and Environment to local agencies that administer the funds. In particular, the funds are used to pay for Sedgwick County Health Department staff that handle WIC matters and other costs and expenses of the WIC program. During that meeting on October 7th, there was a very robust discussion both of the grant itself, and then also Commissioner Ranzau had made a number of requests, two of which are reflected on this slide. The first was that Commissioner Ranzau had asked the KDHE to limit WIC participation to U.S. citizens, nationals, and qualified aliens. And another request was to have county staff develop a form asking about citizenship and immigration status for anyone who seeks benefits from the health department in an effort to gather data. During that meeting, a majority of the Board of County Commissioners expressed support for those two items. And it is important to note that Commissioner Ranzau's request about the sending a letter to the KDHE is supported by a federal regulation, 7 CFR, which stands for Code of Federal Regulations, 246.7, and it's the subsection C3. And what that allows is for a state or a state agency to limit the receipt of benefits under WIC to U.S. citizens, nationals, and qualified aliens, as they're defined in the Immigration Code. And neither the state of Kansas nor the KDHE has taken any action pursuant to that provision to limit the receipt of such benefits in Kansas. On the next slide here, I've included an excerpt from that regulation that has the specific language included in it. And again, at this point, Kansas has not done anything to do that. So Commissioner Ranzau's letter, he sent a letter on October 8th of last year, the day after you all voted on the grant, to the KDHE secretary, requesting that they take any and all action to limit participation as noted in that federal regulation to U.S. citizens, U.S. citizens, nationals, and qualified aliens. That letter was followed up the next week by a letter from Commissioner Unruh that noted that the letter from Commissioner Ranzau was not necessarily representative of all 5 commissioners. He also pointed out that it was not the result of any official action taken in terms of a vote by the county commission, but essentially just a consensus of the commission, of a majority of the commission. Fast forward to October 29th, there was an email sent by USDA staff. Again, they're the ones who originate with the grant funding. It was sent to KDHE staff, who then forwarded that email to Sedgwick County Health Department staff. The subject of the email was really indicating a whole list of potential negative repercussions to Sedgwick County if it were to utilize a questionnaire asking about immigration status. It was very broad in its approach. It also didn't state the official position of the KDHE at any point in the letter, or in the email, I should say. Then next, on November 3rd of 2015, Commissioner Ranzau received a letter from 7 different interest and advocacy groups strongly urging that the county commission not adopt the use of a immigration status questionnaire for any health department participants. It also, again, included a whole listing of potential legal consequences in a very broad fashion. And so after that, on December 1st of last year, Sedgwick County Councilor Eric Yost sent a letter to KDHE's council, and really the gist of the letter was seeking feedback from the KDHE as to what its position was on some of these issues in terms of it included a draft questionnaire that had not been utilized, has not been utilized, but asking for information about that questionnaire in light of the email that KDHE staff had passed along to Sedgwick County Health Department, asking for feedback from KDHE's attorney because, again, they're the granting agency who we have the contract with. Also, they are the grant partner with Sedgwick County Health Department on numerous other health department grants. So the thought was to get some feedback from them. It also, as I said, included a draft questionnaire which had noted that it would be optional. It would not be required in order for someone to receive benefits. It would not be determinative for their ability to receive benefits. It would be kept from any of their medical records, and it would be, again, utilized only for informational purposes. There was no response from the KDHE. As we fast forward to February 19th of this year, then again, Eric Yost, Sedgwick County Councilor, sent a follow-up letter to the KDHE Council requesting a response to the December 1st letter and also requesting a response to the position of the KDHE on Commissioner Ranzau's letter that was sent back on October 8th in terms of the potential for any limitation under that federal regulation that was cited earlier in the slides. Again, no response was received. The letter did ask for a response by March 5th. So we could try to get some sort of an idea what this KDHE's position was. The Sedgwick County Councilor's Office made numerous additional efforts after March 4th to schedule a telephone conference with attorneys from the KDHE. Those proved unsuccessful due to lack of responsiveness by the KDHE's council. The last line on there says, again, no response. Well, that's updated as Eric Yost noted. There was an email that was received. I believe it was sent 7 o'clock last night, received this morning. And I will give a quick update on that. And that email was from one of the attorneys at the KDHE. And there are a few things that are worth noting. They recognize the federal regulation that was cited earlier in the slides. And they say that before any participation could be limited, the KDHE would have to amend their procedures for participation and provide the USDA with amended procedures. And essentially, the USDA has to approve those procedures, too. That's one of the steps. They also note that they made the statement that the county proceeded with its plan to survey clients that could lead to the KDHE terminating the contract for WIC. As well, they also included, they attached in that email some comments that were passed along from the USDA regional office in Denver. They did note in that email, in that passing that along, that state agencies have the option to limit participation in certain circumstances. In order to do this, the state agency must submit the change to the operating procedures for approval. The state must also be aware that this will affect their funding levels as each state agency receives funds based on an allocation formula which calculates a state's fair share. These estimates are based on all eligible individuals, including non-qualified aliens, so an adjustment would be made to the state's estimated population. And so we did get a response from the KDHE on this, albeit a little late in the game for this presentation to make it in there. On this last slide, there is, I've included contact information for the KDHE. And this really summarizes what's transpired from October 7th to today, literally today. And our recommended action on this matter is simply to receive and file. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilor Wagner. Let me just ask a clarity question. In our correspondence, we never suggested that we were intending to limit WIC benefits. We simply talked about the implementation of a data collection questionnaire. Simply, we wanted to implement data collection. We did not necessarily indicate that we had any interest, at least at this time, to begin the process of elimination or of not providing benefits to anybody in the population that would be qualified.
That's correct, Chairman Howell. There was no statement at any point that benefits were being limited. There was a suggestion made to the state that they take measures that they can take under the federal regulations to limit participation, but there was no action taken by the county to limit participation.
It sounds like their email, and I'm sure you'll give us a much more robust briefing on that at some point, but it sounds like their assumption, again, once again, is that our intention is to limit benefits, and should that limitation happen, then there would be things that would happen from the federal government to the state, and then from the state to us. But it sounds to me like they've connected dots that we have not even necessarily proposed. That their assumption is that our end game is to limit benefits, and based on that action, then our pass-through funds from the federal government to KDHE and then to local government would be impacted. And again, I see that they've taken a position that we didn't even recommend, we've not even advocated for necessarily in our correspondence with them. Their assumption is that that's where we're headed. And right now, I think all we've asked for is for the ability to use a data collection form.
And Commissioner Howe, I may clarify my comment just a bit. And they're also saying just using that form, it could lead to the termination of the contract. And I think that's what you were saying. Right. But I just want to make sure that's clear.
And the word they used was could lead to.
Yes.
So it's not saying it would lead to or shall lead to, but potentially would lead to.
That's correct.
And again, okay. I got other questions as well, but let's go ahead and go to the commissioners. Commissioner Ranzau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me clarify. So they said if we did do a questionnaire, there's actually two issues here that we're talking about. First of all, we asked KDHE to limit participation in WIC to legal residents, citizens, and qualified aliens as authorized under the state law. Did they respond as to whether or not they would be willing to do that or not?
They did not give a yes or no answer. They just said if they did it, they listed the steps they'd have to do. And I did want to clarify, it's a federal law, it's a federal regulation that applies to state or state agencies that allows
So here we are 6 months. 6 months after the original request, they've still not answered our letter or question. We simply need a yes or no answer. We've asked that they do it on behalf of the citizens of Sedgwick County and, quite frankly, the state of Kansas. I think the vast majority of citizens in Sedgwick County, Kansas, oppose the idea that illegal aliens should receive welfare benefits or taxpayer subsidies. We just need an answer. Are they willing to do this or not? So that the people can know. And so I think that's important to bring out. 6 months has gone by and we've not gotten a response. It's not that difficult. Secondly, they said that if we did this questionnaire, because we said at the very least, let's get some data on who's receiving benefits. Because some people say lots of illegal aliens are getting taxpayer subsidies and some say they're not. And one way to find out is ask questions. We're just going to do a questionnaire, not limit participation, ask questionnaire. Now they're saying that if we do that for WIC, it could cause us to lose those funds, all funds, right?
It says they may result in termination of the contract. I think implicit along with that could be either a clawback to get any funds that have been provided to the county or something along those lines, yes.
Who would initiate that? And what was the justification? Why would they do that? Why would they terminate the contract just because we want to ask questions?
They do note in their letter that asking the questionnaire could be contrary to established laws, regulations, policies, and procedures the state has put in place for their WIC program. It doesn't get into a lot of
Did they list specifically which laws, rules, and regulations that the state has put in place?
It doesn't go into much detail.
Okay,
on
we
that.
need to ask them what that is, because those laws and regulations could be changed. It's interesting they're taking positions. First of all, under federal law and regulation, you don't have to allow illegal aliens to participate in this program. So how can just asking questions on who's participating be a problem? I think it's very telling from the state's perspective that if they're willing to cancel the contract just because we ask questions to give information to our citizens, what does that say? They're willing to cancel the contract and supposedly funding for all legal residents, citizens, qualified aliens, in order to prevent us from gathering data as to whether or not illegal aliens are participating in this program. Since when are we afraid of the truth and data to the point that we will try to intimidate Sedgwick County, elected officials, the taxpayers? Taxpayers have a right to know. I think we need to understand that the reason they've not responded and with the response they finally have gone is that they are supportive, apparently in Topeka, for illegal aliens to receive taxpayer subsidies in the form of welfare benefit. They just don't want to say it. And if we try to find out how many people are receiving these benefits, they're going to try and intimidate us and threaten to cancel the contract. That's problematic. Could you put up that last slide again? I know a lot of citizens are concerned about this. Here's some contact information. There's a phone number for KDHE, an email for the Deputy Secretary. We couldn't find an email for the Secretary of KDHE. I've had a lot of people ask me this question. All we can do at the local level is ask the question, ask KDHE to exercise what they can do under federal law. They can either choose to do so or choose not to do so. At this point, they've chosen not to do so, and they've chosen to not even respond to this commission's question on behalf of its citizens. If you have a problem with that, you can call them, email them, and I would encourage you to do so, because clearly the problem lies in Topeka. We can't even get an answer. Instead, we're getting delayed responses that seek to really intimidate us from even asking the question and getting data and information on behalf of our citizens. And that's troubling, to say the least. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will make a motion that we receive and file.
Commissioner Peter John?
Well, I'd just like to get a better understanding in terms of, I have not seen the response that they belatedly provided, and I think it's obviously it's distressing that it's taken so long just to get to this point, and I would like to try and get this information out there, because I think the public has a right to be concerned on a whole bunch of, on several different levels. And the idea that we're going to become the, if you come to this country, automatically all these welfare programs become available. And for a large part of the world, all they have to do is manage to get across the border, and their standard of living goes up dramatically. And we're in an interesting and challenging position, because I don't believe we, as either a county, as a state, or as a country, can support the rest of the world. And it's unfortunate that we have gotten to this point today, because I find myself in agreement that the state and federal government needs to have better oversight and the operational controls here. And we just tried to set up just collect a little bit of data, and that seems to be a huge problem, and it shouldn't be, especially in light of the fact that in theory this is something, I don't think welfare should be provided to folks who have broken our law and have come here illegally. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Unruh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if we got a second yet, so I'll be happy to second the motion. I just had a question for County Councilor. Mr. Yost, did you send us a note saying that pursuing this might consume a lot of staff time and research, or do I have my issues?
If we were to research all of the potential legal issues, it would take a fair amount of research to figure out. If we just tried to do it on our own without any assistance from either the KDHE or some federal agency to give us some guidance on what we could do or not do. I provided that to you at the point in which we hadn't heard back, and we were just kind of on our own to figure out what the possible consequences might be.
Okay.
And so that is our position, that it would require a fair amount of research for us to dig into it and figure out what we're looking at if we decide as a county to either deny benefits or even possibly to just ask for this information.
Okay, well, I thought that you'd indicated there might be some cost, but maybe this email you got this morning will modify that.
I'll take a look at it.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Just a couple comments for myself. You know, it's interesting to me that on the presidential election that's going on, there's been a lot of rhetoric about solving illegal immigration in this country. And if you can't understand the magnitude of the issue, how do you even begin to solve that problem? The candidates are very bold in discussing ways that they're going to be aggressively solving this problem. And frankly, if we can't even collect data when we hand out benefits, to me it seems that we've got a lot of barriers in place that we've got to solve before we can even begin to substantially solve the issues of illegal immigration. It's interesting also that private physicians ask lots of questions about things that are mandated to them by the federal government. One of the ones I've seen personally that bothers me personally is they ask, you're there to get your foot checked out. They ask if you have any firearms. And they're collecting data on things that are social, that are important to the federal government, and those things are mandated as well. So it's interesting to me that those questions are being asked by physicians that are completely unrelated to the services that are being provided. Let me also say that private physicians also are being required, I think, to collect data in terms of the country of origin that the people they're providing services to. Again, stating their race, their ethnicity, their country of origin. Those are questions that are routinely asked on doctors' forms. They're collecting data to understand the population that they serve. Again, I think that the assumptions by this community is that we've got a illegal immigration problem, and I'm not saying we do or we don't. I'm saying we have no data to back up those sentiments. I think as long as we're providing benefits, we ought to have the right to find out who the population actually is. It's a very simple question. And again, I don't think this necessarily leads to any action by the Board of County Commissioners in terms of whether we would continue to provide benefits to the same population or make any changes or request to make any changes. But simply understanding the population that we serve, I think, is a first step. And I think this is a very minor thing, and yet it comes with consequences of threats of stripping funding. And I just find that to be a very illogical outcome to a very simple question. And so I'm surprised at their response. I don't think I wonder if they understand what we're actually asking for. I'm not sure they do. Let me also say there's been a lot of discussion apparently at KDHE because Daniel Salazar from the Wichita Eagle, I guess back in January, did a KORA request, a Kansas Open Records request, and they were able to provide him some emails between a number of the people at KDHE talking about this issue. And I've read this at length, and there's lots of discussion back and forth between different people at KDHE, yet they don't respond to us. And again, the response, I think, is needed. We are an important part of the state. We have 1/6 of the population that lives here in Sedgwick County. It seems like when we make a request, a legitimate request for information from one of our state agencies, they have a responsibility to respond, and 6 months is too long. I have made a number of requests to the Attorney General in terms of Attorney General opinions. I've requested that, and that's a very lengthy process for them to research the case laws in the nation and the state to determine what the Attorney General would decide on opinions. And sometimes I ask a very simple question and get a 8 or 10 page response because it's a very complex requirement that he has to respond, and that usually takes 6 months. When we ask a very simple question to KDHE, it should not take 6 months to get a response, and yet this response today, in my opinion, the timing is suspicious. That they have only responded simply trying to I guess maybe encourage us not to disclose to the public exactly what has happened up to this point. Commissioner Ranzau.
Yes. Just to clarify, Mr. Counselor, I think we'll have some more discussions, but at the very least, I think the position should be back to them is that you still, when they refuse to respond to us, they're refusing to respond to our constituents. And our constituents still deserve an answer on the original question. And with respect to, if we use a questionnaire, exactly, we want specific actions they are prepared to take and the regulatory and legal basis for those actions. Isn't that what we're seeking?
I will take a look. As I mentioned, I haven't had an opportunity to go through their response, but if their response is lacking, and if it is not responsive to the questions we put to them, I will ask again. And maybe now that we've actually heard from a real human being at KDHE, which is the first, frankly, that this has happened, I will contact that person. I might even call him and go over it with him.
And perhaps another option is perhaps we need to seek some sort of legislation, relief from the legislature to simply pass a law that forces them to do it. I would hope that we don't need to go that far, but that's an option perhaps we should at least consider as we move forward. Thank you.
All right. See no further discussion. Madam Clerk, we have a motion and a second. Please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Commissioner Ransoff.
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. Commissioners, we've been going for 2.5 hours, and we have at least another fairly long presentation coming up in a few minutes. I guess I'd like to move that we would recess for 5 minutes and give us a few minutes to stretch our legs, if that's okay. I don't think we need a motion. We'll just go ahead and we'll recess for 5 minutes and come back at 11:33.
a school speed zone on 143rd Street East from 700 feet north of Pawnee to a point 2,900 feet north of Pawnee.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, David Spears, Director of Public Works. This resolution establishes a 40-mile-per-hour school speed zone on 143rd Street East between Harry and Pawnee along the frontage of the Krista McAuliffe Academy K-8 school. The effective times will be coordinated annually with USD 259, and for the remainder of this year, the times of operation will be 7:30 a.m. to 8:05 a.m. and 3 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Existing beacons that operate during the times just mentioned to alert motorists to the existence of a school in that area will be modified with the appropriate signing to provide for the 40-mile-per-hour school zone speed limit. This resolution is being offered for your consideration in light of the August opening of the new Southeast High School. Increases in traffic are anticipated during those times when students will be en route to and from school, and the school speed zone will raise awareness during those times. The request for the school speed zone was made by Pam Paulson, Assistant Supervisor of Field Services for USD 259. I recommend that you adopt the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Spears, for that presentation. Is there any increased traffic at the lunch hour around the school? Do we know? I know there's obviously a lot of students arriving in the morning and leaving in the afternoon, but is there any increased traffic in the afternoon that we know around lunchtime? Do we know?
We haven't taken counts on that. As I said, it's K-8, so I imagine the kids stay there at lunch hour.
And I assume that as well. Okay. And if, of course, if we see a need, I'm sure we can make amendments to this if we ever needed to. But twice a day makes sense. And then the flashing lights that are being discussed here, they're already in place there, but they don't indicate a lower speed limit. They simply just
correct. We have those in several school areas around the county, and these do not have a speed limit on. So all we have to do is add the signs to those poles and lights, and the signs are ready. And if you pass this, we will probably have them up this afternoon.
That's very exciting. Thank you for that. I'd like to say to Councilmember Pete Meitzner and I met with a number of people in the community that were interested in discussions about traffic flows around the new Southeast High School, which opens this next fall. And there was a lot of concern by those constituents. And so Councilmember Meitzner and the public, I think, really encouraged us to take this action. And of course, I've asked you to present this and prepare this. And I think we're just being responsive to the community, and I think this makes a lot of sense. We have K-8 school. This is a county road. It's been 55 miles an hour around the clock, despite the fact that we have an elementary school right there on this road. And so the traffic is very congested trying to get in and out of that school around these hours. And a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. We've been, I think, very fortunate. We've not had any terrible accidents there, and so I just think this is a very prudent and smart thing for us to do today, and I appreciate the presentation. The cost is very small. I think we're doing the things that the people really want. And of course, when the school's not in session, because these are controlled by flashing lights, the higher speed limit would still be available to the community around the school that doesn't need to be impeded by slow speed limits. So this is a smart way to do this, and I think this is the right thing for us to do. Commissioners, I would like to make a motion that we would adopt the resolution. Okay, I should go ahead and ask, does anybody from the community want to speak to this item before we take action here? Seeing none. And any other further comments or questions from the commissioners? Okay, seeing none. Madam Clerk, we have a motion and a second. Please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton.
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Commissioner Ransoff.
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Spears. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item M, presentation of the 2015 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Chris Cronus, your Chief Financial Officer. Your meeting has gone for about 2.5 hours so far. I promise you that I won't take another 2.5 hours, but it may feel like it. We have delivered to you the county's comprehensive annual financial report, this book, which contains about 150 pages full of numbers and text describing numbers, and it makes for great reading for people like me and not so great reading for most human beings. but it does provide very complete and accurate disclosure of the results of the county's financial activity for the 2015 fiscal year, which ended on December the 31st. Sedgwick County is required by state law as well as by various bond covenants to produce annual financial statements annually within 6 months of the end of the fiscal year. We are producing and delivering these 3 months after the end of the fiscal year, so we are well within that threshold. We are required as well to have those financial statements audited by an independent CPA firm. That action has been taken by the firm of Allen Gibbs and Hulick and Shelley Hammond, who is the account manager for Sedgwick County's audit and just walked into the room, will come up here as soon as I have finished this presentation and share with you the results of the audit that they performed on these financial statements. The financial report and, more importantly, the day-to-day financial accounting activity that was required in order to generate the numbers that go into the report were produced by our very excellent accounting staff under the direction of Sarah Jantz, who is sitting in the room here, and a variety of members of her staff are in the room as well. And because this is very melodic, I'm going to take the opportunity to tell you that in the room from the accounting department we have Sarah, Brandy, Mandy, and Sarah. And they do excellent work for us. As always, I can take no credit for the work of actually having done it, but I'm happy to stand up here and take credit for the good results. The county and any government accounts for its financial activity in two different ways. We are required to primarily to answer questions about our near-term financing capabilities. What do I mean by that? Well, in the private sector, the primary interest of the entity is to know whether or not they made a profit and what their overall financial position is. That's kind of a long-term view of the finances of an entity. In the private sector, we are not here to make a profit. We are here to deliver services that can't be delivered by private entities to our community. And in order to provide those services, we have to have the ability to fund those services. And so what we are interested in primarily in governmental accounting is the near-term financing capability of the government. And for that, we use a basis of accounting called modified accrual, which produces traditional fund statements. And you're all familiar with those. But for the folks who are viewing, what that means is that instead of consolidating all of our accounts and records, as, for example, General Motors does when they produce financial reports, we maintain separate sets of books for the various separate dedicated funding streams that we have, or for the various separate specific activities that we need to keep segregated. And so those fund statements produce information that I'm going to share with you today. We also produce information using what is termed a full accrual basis of accounting, which is the traditional ways businesses report their financial information. And for the statements that are done in that fashion, we provide what are called entity-wide statements, where just as General Motors is rolling up all of the activity of its various divisions into a single set of financial statements, we are rolling up all of the activities of those various funds that I mentioned and producing a single set of financial statements for the entity. So today I'm going to spend a little bit of time, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about each of those different methods of accounting. I'm going to begin with the traditional fund statements. And for them, I'm going to begin, if you will, at the end with the fund balance, the amount of net assets that we have on hand within our accumulated governmental funds as of the end of a year. And what you see on this chart shows 5 years of history so that you can get a sense of where changes have occurred over the last 5 years and what kind of changes have transpired. What this chart shows you is a different color representing a different fund or fund type for all of the county's governmental activities. The green at the bottom is the county's general fund, which is far and away the largest single area of our financial system, and it's where most governmental activities take place. The general fund ended 2015 with a fund balance of $65 million. That was $3.6 million less than the amount a year previously, and you can see, looking back across the time period that is shown here, that our fund balance has consistently been between $65 and $68 million during that period of time. So relatively flat general fund balance. The blue segment immediately above the green represents our federal and state assistance funds, if you will, the grant funds. And you see, again, relatively constant fund balance across time. The gray segment, the next segment, represents all other funds other than the ones that I'm going to enumerate for you here. And it combines the fund balances of the highway fund and the EMS fund and the ComCare tax fund and so on and so forth. And you see that the fund balance for all of those other funds at the end of the year was $43.5 million. Again, relatively constant over time, although somewhat of a decrease from 5 years ago. There's a thin blue line that represents debt service funds, $3.1 million. Then there is a orangey yellow color that represents our debt proceeds funds. These are funds that account for bond proceeds from the sale of debt, and the proceeds haven't yet been used either to pay for the projects or to refund the debt for which the bonds were sold. The fund balance for that set of accounts is $44.9 million. And finally, at the top of the chart, you see the Public Building Commission Fund, which had an ending fund balance of $41.9 million, and that is primarily money that was collected by the Public Building Commission to pay for a building on WSU's Innovation Campus, and the bonds that the PBC sold to pay for that building will be repaid solely with the proceeds of the Wichita State University mill levy that we impose. Now, turning to the general fund, since that is the most important operating fund that we have, I want to spend a little bit more time delving into it. And what you see on this chart identifies each of those 5 years of general fund balances, and it identifies the classification of fund balance within each year. The reddish brown color at the bottom represents non-spendable fund balance, net assets that are attributable to inventories and other things that can't be readily spent. The gray bar represents assigned fund balance. Every year when we adopt a budget, we anticipate and budget for a large amount of contingencies in case we get hit by a major storm event or we have some major crisis, and that's to provide legal spending authority. We don't ever expect that storm to hit or that crisis to occur, and so we don't want to raise property taxes every year to fund those contingencies, and so we fund them with fund balance. When we do that, we are assigning that fund balance. We are designating a use for it in the subsequent year. And you see that the designated fund balance, or the assigned fund balance, was $16.1 million. The green segment at the top of the chart is unassigned fund balance. That's the amount of the general fund balance for which there has been no designated use. Now, the sum of the unassigned fund balance and the assigned fund balance, $39.7 million and $16.1 million at the end of 2015, equals what in accounting terms is termed unrestricted fund balance. And our fund balance policy says that the unrestricted general fund balance should never be less than 20% of budgeted expenditures and transfers in the general fund. What you see on this chart is a demonstration of our compliance with that policy limitation. We ended the year with $55.7 million of unrestricted fund balance, the sum of the assigned and unassigned. Our 2016 general fund budget is $195.5 million. The 20% threshold, the minimum of $195.5 million, is $39.1 million. And so we are in excess of that as of December the 15th. Our unrestricted fund balance at the end of the year stood at 28.5% as compared to our 20% minimum threshold, and it exceeded the minimum threshold by $16.6 million. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about some indicators of financial condition within the fund statements. One of the key questions that we want to be able to answer has to do with the budgetary solvency of our governmental funds. And the first question is, are the county's annual revenues sufficient to pay for the annual budget? What you see on this chart shows 10 years of history, and for each year it identifies the percentage that revenues made of expenditures. What we want to see, ideally, is for those dots, those data points, to be right at or slightly above the 100% line. What we see on the chart is that we have pretty consistently been below the 100% line. In 2015, our governmental fund revenues amounted to about 92% of governmental fund expenditures. And in fact, we have been below the 100% threshold every year since 2009. Now, that measures all governmental expenditure activity, which includes some capital projects and debt-funded projects and the PBC's activity. To get a more reasonable picture of whether or not we are able to pay for our own operations, we use this indicator, which takes the same revenue base and compares it to the governmental fund expenditures excluding the PBC and debt service and debt proceeds funds. And so here we have more of an operating solvency measure as opposed to a budgetary solvency measure. Again, we would like to be at or above 100%, and again, we are below it, although we are closer. In 2015, we ended the year with revenues at about 96.5% of expenditures. Another question that we want to answer has to do with the flexibility of county finances. To what extent do we have full control over the use of our resources? And in order to answer that question, we look at the total debt service, the total principal and interest obligations that the county has incurred as a percentage of all expenditures that we incur. To the extent that we have debt service expenditures, obviously they take priority over everything else because we have contractual obligations that we have to fulfill. And so to the extent that we have those expenditures, they're going to consume the available resources that we have. At the end of the year of 2015, our debt service expenditures amounted to about 6.2% of all governmental fund expenditures. You see on this chart that we have consistently been around the 6% line, except for the years 2011 through 2014, when our debt service expenditures spiked because we were engaging in a series of refundings, and so we were paying off bonds prematurely during those years. A final question, I think this is the final question, that we want to ask is whether or not the county has any difficulty paying its short-term obligations. And for this liquidity measure, we're looking at the total cash and investments that the county has on hand at the end of the year as a percentage of the liabilities that the county had on hand at the end of the year. What it shows is that at the end of 2015, our cash on hand amounted to about $8.80 for every dollar of liability. And that's a pretty good liquidity situation to be in. You see that our liquidity was much better at the beginning of this 10-year period, and that's because that's when we were in the process of building the Intrust Bank Arena. Recall that we had imposed a special sales tax in 2005 and continued collecting that revenue through the end of 2007. And during that period of time, we collected a little bit in excess of $200 million of revenue. We put that in the bank, and then starting late in 2007, we began spending it to build the arena. And so for those years, 2006 through 2010 really, our liquidity was elevated because we were sitting on that dedicated sales tax cash that hadn't yet been used. And this is the final measure. How much are we relying on other governments to fund our activity? What is total intergovernmental revenue as a percentage of total revenue? And what we have seen over the past 10 years is that intergovernmental revenue has consistently been between 14 and 16% of all revenue within our governmental funds. There was a what appears to be a spike at 2015 from prior years. That was attributable to a $5 million grant that we received to pay for one particular road project, an anomaly, if you will, over the long-term trend. But what this chart shows is that we are not heavily reliant on intergovernmental revenue to pay for our operations, and it shows further that the extent of our reliance has been relatively constant over the past 10 years. Now I'm turning to the entity-wide statements, the statements that wrap all of the county's financial activity up into a single set of statements on a full accrual basis, similar to what a private business would do. Once again, with these statements, we'll begin at the end and talk about the county's net position. In effect, our net worth. The county had a net position at the end of 2015 of $507.1 million, and that is identified by the series of bars on the left-hand side of this chart. Each bar represents a separate year, and so you can see that in 2015, that $507 million was a good bit less than the level a year previously when our net position was $620.3 million. I'll get back to the cause for that in just a second. Within each bar, you can see the composition of our net position. The green segment identifies capital assets net of any debt that is outstanding that was used to pay for those assets. And it has slowly risen over this 5-year period to a total of $472.5 million at the end of 2015. The blue segment represents restricted net position. And you see the nature of the restrictions in the pie chart on the right-hand side. Restricted net position is restricted primarily because of some dedication of funding streams. So you see that we have funds that have been restricted to be used for capital improvements. We have funds that have been restricted for debt service. We have grant funds, federal and state assistance funds that have been restricted, and so forth. You see the nature of those restrictions. All told, our restricted net position at the end of 2015 was $64.1 million, about $5 million less than a year previously. Finally, the light blue segment represents unrestricted net position, and that's where the change has taken place. In 2014, our unrestricted net position was $85.2 million. In 2015, our unrestricted net position is a negative $29.6 million. That is a swing, if you will, of about $115 million. And that is attributable to a new accounting rule that took place for the first time in 2015 which required us to reflect on the county's financial statements our share of the unfunded liability of the state's pension system, of the CAFR's pension system. In the case of Sedgwick County, that unfunded liability amounts to about $122 million. And so it is reflected on our financial statements for the first time in 2015. Now, that looks bad. Has the county's financial abilities, has our capacity to pay our bills changed? No. What that means, in effect, is that if CAFR's shut its doors today, the amount of money that CAFR's would have to pay to county employees for retirements that they have already earned would exceed the amount of money that Sedgwick County and its employees have paid into CAFR's thus far by $122 million, more or less. We know that CAFR's isn't going to shut its doors today, and so what we have here really is an accounting entry that has no real effect on the county's financial condition. Nevertheless, it doesn't look very pretty, and what you will see if you look at any general governmental financial statement in Kansas this year, you will see a similar kind of a picture for any city and county in the state. For example, the city of Wichita isn't a member of CAFR's. They have their own pension system, but within their pension system, they also have some unfunded liability, which they now have to put on their books for the first time. So what we want to know with financial position, and perhaps the most important question, is did it improve or deteriorate? And what I'm suggesting to you on this chart is that our financial position actually improved from the prior year by about 2.5 or 3%. How can that be? Our net financial position decreased $115 or $120 million, and I'm suggesting to you that we improved even with that. Well, here is how that can be. What this chart shows is the causes of change in net financial position. We began the year with a total of $620.3 million of net position, consisting of $450.8 million of governmental activities and $169.4 million of business type activities. And in our case, that means Intrust Bank Arena. During the course of the year, we received $335.3 million of revenue, and we incurred $320.3 million of expense. Our revenues exceeded our expenses by $15 million. That is the cause of me saying that our financial position improved year over year. The CAFR's change is reflected on the accounting statements, on the financial statements, as a prior period adjustment, as if it didn't actually happen during the course of 2015. And that CAFR's change amounted to, the total change amounted to $128.3 million. And so it is what caused our beginning position of $620 million to drop to $507 million at the end of the year. But during the course of the year, the activity, the real financial activity of Sedgwick County is such that our financial position improved because our revenues exceeded our expenses. One of the things that we are always concerned with is the extent to which the various activities of the county are able to support themselves with their own self-generated revenue. Now, we are not in a profit-making business. I've already said that. And so we don't expect governmental activities to be fully self-supporting, but to the extent that they can generate their own revenues, it means that we don't have to provide tax support in order to pay for those activities. So what you see on this chart are the various activities of the government, the functions of government, represented by a bar, and within that bar, the total is the amount of expense that was incurred for the year. The green is the amount of program revenue or self-generated revenue that activity produced to pay its bills. And the blue is the amount of general revenue or tax support that was necessary in order to pay the bills of that activity. What the chart shows is that far and away the largest single activity of Sedgwick County in terms of expense is public safety. During 2015, we spent $140 million on public safety activities. Public safety was able to produce $40 million of program revenue through municipal jail fees and various grants to cover those bills, but the balance, $100 million, was required to be provided by taxes levied on Sedgwick County residents. So 71% of public safety activities were funded by taxes. Similarly, you can see for each of the functions of government the extent to which they were self-supporting. Now, the item that I think most people would be surprised by is health and welfare, which is the second largest activity of Sedgwick County. In 2015, health and welfare activities, ComCare, the Health Department, CDDO, Aging Services, cumulatively incurred about $58 million worth of expenses. Of that $58 million, about $48 million was paid for with program income generated by those activities. And here we're talking about fees that are imposed on clients of the Human Services Department and grant revenues that are collected to provide services to clients of the Human Services Department. The amount of tax support necessary to deliver human service activities or health and welfare activities was $9.5 million, 17% of the total amount of money that we spent on those activities. Now, again, there are different measures that can be looked at to determine the adequacy of financial position and of the entity-wide statements. And what I'm going to focus on here is a solvency measure, which looks at the county's ability to pay off its long-term debt with its assets. So what we're doing is taking long-term liabilities as a percentage of assets. And what we see is that at 2015, we ended the year with long-term liabilities equal to about 36% of assets. In other words, 36 cents of every liability was covered by $1 of assets. And so we are in very good condition to pay off our long-term debt. Now, you do see a spike in that measure over the past 2 years. The 2014 increase from what traditionally had been about the 20% threshold, the 2014 increase to 25 or 26% was attributable to some debt refinancings that we were undertaking. The 2015 spike up to above the 35% threshold is attributable to that new CAFR liability that we have to reflect on our books. But even with that liability, what this chart shows is that we have ample ability to repay our debts. Now, in the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, there is a section called Statistics at the end of the book, and that section contains an awful lot of good information for anybody who might be interested in evaluating Sedgwick County finances. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time showing some of the indicators, some of the trends that can be identified by looking at those statistics. First, what we want to look at is the 10-year history of governmental revenues and expenses. On this chart, the green represents revenue, the blue represents expense. You can see, and you would want to see, that the green revenue is higher than the blue expense, and in most years it is. You can also see the extent to which revenues and expenses have grown over the 10-year period. And what the chart shows is that since about 2010, neither have grown very much, and in fact, during much of that period of time, expenses were decreasing yearly. We ended the year with $334.4 million of revenue and $315.2 million of expense. We can also determine where the county has been placing its emphasis over the past 10 years by looking at the change of expenses over that 10-year period by function. And what this chart shows is the amount of expenses, the amount of increase of expenses in 2015 versus 2006, 10 years previously. The greatest source of increase for county expenses over that 10-year period has been public safety at $23.8 million. And that's kind of what you would want to see, considering that the Board of Commissioners consistently has said that their highest priority is public safety. So what this says is that they are not just talking about public safety being a priority, but that's where they're allocating their resources. Public Works is another area where the Commission has said it places a priority. And over that 10-year period, Public Works expenditures increased $6.5 million. Culture and recreation expenses increased $8 million over that 10-year period. But I want to point out that in 2015, the Commission contributed a little bit over $5 million to the zoo for the new elephant barn, and that accounts for 60% of that $8 million increase. If we took out that one-time expense, we would be at $3 million of increase over the 10-year period. General government activities actually incurred less expense in 2015 than in 2006, and health and welfare experienced a substantial decrease in expenses over that 10-year period. Almost $10 million less was spent on health and welfare activities in 2015 than in 2006. That's a function of budget reductions that were made primarily in 2012, when the health and welfare activity incurred a 6.7% budget cut. And during this period of time, also, there have been reductions in staffing at ComCare and aging. And additionally, in CDDO, there has been a reduction in the amount of state support for some of the CDDO activities. And those cumulatively amount to this decrease in total spending for health and welfare.
Chris, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask a question real quickly on that before we go on. Yesterday, I think when we talked about this, there's in the larger report there's more detail. It shows what spending happened in each of the years. The other cuts that happened, you said there was the large cut that happened in 2012. That was what? You said 6.7%. 6.7%. And then there was another cut happened, I think, in 2014, about $2 million?
I believe that's right.
And then there was subsequently, I think, another $1 million cut the following year?
Yes.
So altogether, that constitutes majority of that reduction was in those 3 years?
Yes, I think so. That's right. Yes.
Do you recall what cut did we make last year in the 2016 budget deliberations? Can you remind me?
I'm sorry, I don't recall.
Okay. If anybody can look that up, I'd appreciate that information.
Okay.
Okay. And I'd just like to know that because I think it's important to the community to know when these cuts happened. Thank you. Please continue.
Okay. Within our revenues, I've talked before about the expectation that activities generate program revenue as much as is possible to pay their own way so that we don't have to levy general taxes on the citizenry. And what this chart shows is 10 years of history of property tax revenue represented by the blue line and program revenue represented by the green line. 10 years ago, program revenue and property tax revenue were almost equal. Property tax was a little bit higher at $128.9 million versus $120.7 million. You can see over the 10-year period that program revenue increased initially at about the same rate as property taxes, but then starting in 2010 through 2013, there were decreases in program revenue pretty consistently. And during that period of time, property taxes took a slight dip, but stayed essentially constant over that 10-year period. As a result, at the end of the 10-year period, 2015, property taxes now are substantially higher than program revenue, $160.4 million versus $136.4 million. And so what the chart shows is that over this past 10 years, the county has become increasingly reliant on property taxes as the principal funding stream to pay for county services. And because we're so reliant on property taxes, we pay a lot of attention to the collection rate. How effective are we at collecting the property taxes that have been levied? This chart shows 10 years of history for collection rates. And the most important thing that I think it shows is that the county's collection rate, which is controlled principally by the activities of the county treasurer, has never been bad. At its very worst over this 10-year period, the county collected 95.7% of all taxes that had been levied. In other words, unpaid taxes represented less than 4.5% of the total levy. If you look across the country, you will see that that is considered to be a very good collection rate. That was the worst that we performed over this 10-year period. You see that the collection rate from that low point in 2009 has steadily increased, and at 2014, and we're talking here about tax years, so the 2014 tax year funded the 2015 budget. We don't yet have the 2015 tax year data because those taxes are still being collected. The 2014 tax year ended with a collection rate right at 97.5%, the highest collection rate that we have on record. And so this suggests that the treasurer has been doing a very effective job of collecting property taxes, which is very, very important for us because that's our primary source of funding for the county government. Finally, I want to talk about long-term debt. And what you see on this chart is 10 years of history for the county's outstanding debt, each year represented by a bar. And within each year, there are different colors representing different kinds of debt. In 2015, the county had $64.4 million of general obligation debt. That's the green at the bottom. We had $2.8 million of special assessment debt. That's the thin blue line immediately above the green. We had $146.3 million of PBC debt. That's the reddish brown color. And then we had a very slight amount, about $1 million more or less, of lease debt represented by fire apparatus. And that's the black at the very top of the chart. What this chart shows is that the general obligation debt of the county has decreased steadily since its peak in 2009 at $85.4 million, down to $64.4 million now. The reddish brown, the PBC debt, also started decreasing in 2012 and 2013, but then it spiked in 2014. That was caused by a refunding that we did in that year, so we sold additional debt for the refunding, and it was caused by the PBC's funding of a building for Wichita State University on the new innovation campus. That debt, as I've said previously, that debt will only be repaid with the proceeds of the special property tax that is levied for WSU. And so it's not a general county obligation. What you see on the far right are two arrows. The top arrow identifies what happens if we take out that WSU debt and look only at the outstanding county debt. So we ended the year with about $170 million of total county debt. That is about the same as we had in 2011 or 2012. But it also includes a substantial portion of debt that was issued to refund some bonds. and those bonds haven't yet been redeemed, and so we are currently, or as of December 31st, excuse me, of 2015, we had on hand the debt that was to be refunded, as well as the debt that we had sold to do the refunding. And so we were double counting some debt, if you will. If you exclude that, which amounted to another $34 million, you arrive at a total real county debt number of $136 million at the end of 2015. At 2013, that was about $165 million. So within 2 years, we have reduced pure county debt from something on the order of $160 million down to about $136 million. And that is, I think, a reflection of the emphasis that you as commissioners have paid on the reduction of county debt, and it's an illustration of the fact that we have been pretty successful in accomplishing that goal. Now, also in the statistics section, there are some charts that show 10 years of data about county performance. Everything that I've said up to this point has to do with numbers and ratios and stuff that is important to people like me, but not all that important to most citizens. What citizens are interested in is what do they get for their money. And so what I want to talk about in the conclusion of this presentation is just that. What did the county do with all that money in 2015? Let's begin with public safety activities. In 2015, we averaged a little bit more than 47,000 calls per month in our emergency communication center, in the 911 center. That was a 16% increase over 1 year ago and a 31% increase over 10 years ago. Our emergency medical service responded to 5,300 calls per month in 2015. That was 6% more than they did a year previously and 39% more than they did 10 years ago. In our detention facilities, in the juvenile detention facility, the average daily population was 64. That was about 3% more than a year previously. It was 48% less than 10 years ago. And that's a manifestation of the policies that you and your predecessors have adopted over the past 10 years to intentionally try and reduce the need to house juveniles in detention facilities. It shows that you have been successful. Similarly, in our adult detention facility, in the jail, the sheriff had 1,406 people in custody on average every day of last year. That was 3% more than a year previously and 7% less than 10 years ago. Once again, about 10 years ago, you'll recall that the county was on the verge of spending about $55 or $60 million for a major expansion of the jail because of overpopulation. Instead of doing that, the commission elected to adopt a series of what we term alternative jail programs, new diversion programs that are intended to provide different ways of handling people who have committed crimes rather than housing them in the jail. And what this chart shows is that those programs have been very successful. They have reduced the average daily population at the jail 48% over the last 10 years. I'm sorry, 7% over the last 10 years. Wrong line. We have done those public safety services and others that I'm about to talk about with 1,326 employees as of the end of 2015. That was 6% fewer than a year ago and 8% fewer than 10 years ago. And so what this chart says to me is that the county is providing more service with fewer employees. You'll see that is a pretty common theme as we go through these remaining tables. In terms of fire service, the fire department reported that in 2015 they responded to 167 residential structural fires per 100,000 households. That is reported as an 84% increase over a year previously and a 46% decrease over 10 years previously. Now, in talking with the fire department about that statistic, what we've learned is that in 2015, or perhaps at the end of 2014, they implemented a new reporting system, and so we think that the 167 fires reported for 2015 is an inflated number. We think it includes fires that weren't residential structural fires. And so we're not sure exactly that that's an accurate statistic. But to the extent that the 167 is overinflated, it means that the decrease over the past 10 years is even greater than the 48% that is depicted here. That's a feature of fire services nationwide, as local governments have imposed tougher building regulations and stricter building codes requiring sprinkler systems and smoke detectors and things of that sort. What we have seen nationwide is that fire services are needed less and less to respond to fires. That's a very good thing. The flip side is that they have been needed increasingly to provide first responder medical services, and that's true in Sedgwick County as well. In 2015, the fire service, the Sedgwick County Fire District, responded to an average of 462 medical calls per month. That was an 11% increase over a year previously and a 116% increase over 10 years ago. In health and welfare services, and remember I said that that was the second largest expense activity of the county. In health and welfare services, ComCare saw 12,940 mental health clients in 2015, an increase of 3% over 1 year and 6% over 10 years. CDDO, the Community Developmental Disabilities Organization, had 2,554 citizens of Sedgwick County who were eligible to receive its services. That was a 1% increase over 1 year and a 30% increase in their responsibility over 10 years ago. And we provided health and welfare services with 520 employees, about the same number as a year ago, 5% fewer than we had 10 years ago. In public health, in the health department, we had patient encounters, appointments if you will, with 107,960 clients. And that's not unique people, that's 170,000 appointments for clients. That was an 11% increase over 1 year, a 14% increase over 10 years. We provided 13,285 immunizations, about the same as a year previously, a 54% decrease from 10 years ago, and that's a function of a decision by the Board of County Commissioners some years back to get out of the immunization business for certain kinds of immunizations for certain kinds of clients. And in tuberculosis encounters, there were 3,819 for the health department in 2015, a 39% increase over 1 year, a 52% decrease over 10 years. In culture and recreation, the zoo had attendance of almost 582,000 people in 2015, a 10% increase over 1 year, a 20% increase over 10 years. Sedgwick County Park had annual attendance of 944,000 people, a 2% decrease, a slight decrease from a year ago, a 29% increase from 10 years ago. And culture and recreation services were provided with 104 employees, 8% more than a year ago because of the addition of employees at the zoo to handle the new elephant exhibit, and a 23% decrease over 10 years ago. At Intrust Bank Arena, ignore the 53% that shouldn't be in that caption. At Intrust Bank Arena, we had 107 events. The building wasn't open 10 years ago, but over 1 year, that was a 7% increase. It had attendance of almost 440,000 people, a 47% increase over 2014. It has continued to be very successful, and its success is increasing over time. In 2015, the Polestar ticket sales ranking, which means its rank in comparison to all other arenas in the United States, it was 35th among all arenas in the sale of tickets for events in 2015. That was a 52% improvement over its ranking a year previously. And most importantly to me as CFO, the arena returned, as of the end of 2015, a total of little more than $2 million to Sedgwick County from operating gains by SMG, the operator of the facility. That's a 23% increase over the amount of money returned to Sedgwick County a year previously. In Public Works, you have said that you place a great emphasis on Public Works. That's one of your priorities. In 2015, the number of road miles improved was 186, a 92% increase over 1 year, and an 81% increase over 10 years ago. The number of miles that Public Works is responsible for in Sedgwick County was 603, a 3% decrease from 10 years ago, and that decrease is attributable to roads being annexed by cities over this 10-year period. The Household Hazardous Waste Facility handled almost 600 tons of waste, a 52% increase over 10 years ago. And Public Works services were delivered with 119 employees, a 3% increase over a year ago and a 10% decrease over 10 years ago. And finally, in general government,